Good afternoon, members. In the same way they always say, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want. I'm not dressing for the weather we've got, I'm dressing for the weather I wish we had at the moment. So, thank you for attending this afternoon. You may have noticed as you come in, there are some boxes, paper and scales. So it's completely voluntarily, but there is opportunity for those that would like to. You can weigh yourself anonymously, or you can put your name on it, put it in the bucket, and then at the end of the year we're going to do the same thing again, and hopefully it'll be a lot less number, so we can see how much the council has lost, how much each party has lost, so we can get a bit of competition between us. And it's really a way of showing support. So I've had a few members already do it on their way in. Don't feel you have to, but have a bit of fun. Even if you just use the scales, you don't need to tell anyone what it is, but you can have a look yourself, so be of interest. Also, thank you to councillors who turned up to my coffee morning this morning, and also those that sent family members along to help. So I think before we go any further, I'm going to call on the Reverend Gabriel Burns from the synagogue to say prayers. Thank you very much.
Honoured I am to be here this afternoon, this wonderful warm afternoon. Coming here, I once told the synagogue in one of my sermons that I planned the sermon according to the distance it takes me to get to the actual synagogue from where I'm staying. It's usually a distance of about 12 minutes. I came with a taxi this afternoon from the synagogue. For those who want, I'll leave you his name afterwards. It must be the slowest taxi driver in Portsmouth. And it took me over 25 minutes to get here. But I will not speak for 25 minutes, if you'll allow me just to offer a thought at this very important meeting. Important because whenever people get together as a responsible party, responsible not only for themselves, but for constituents and members who live locally, it's a very important and worthy situation. And we always tend to look or ask somebody higher than us or somebody who has been there before, what are we supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? And today I thought I would go to the highest of the high, and I will go to King David. And King David, when he wrote the book of Psalms, left us with a wonderful ideas and details of how we are indeed to plan ourselves. And the psalm I want to commence, I want to begin with, Psalm 121. Eso einai el heharim me'ayin yovo ezri. I lift up my eyes unto the hills. Where will my help come from? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. Your guardian doth not slumber. Indeed, our guardian never slumbers, never sleeps. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you against all evil. He will guard your life. The Lord will guard your going and your coming from this time forth and forevermore. I can offer a prayer to this very worthy council. May he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bless and protect this council, the members of the Portsmouth City Council, those who provide the lamps and those who provide charity for the poor, faithfully occupy themselves with the needs of the community. May the Holy One, blessed be he, give them their reward. May he remove from them all sickness, heal all their body, and forgive all their iniquity. May he send blessing and success in all their activities, and let us say Amen. May it be your will, O Lord our God and God of our fathers, to inaugurate this meeting for good, to indeed grant us all a life full of sustenance, a life of physical health, a life marked by the fear of heaven and the dread of sin, a life free from shame and disgrace, a life of wealth and honor, and the reverence of heaven shall be upon us, a life in which the desires of our hearts and the hearts of all our constituents shall be fulfilled for good. Amen. That concludes prayer for this afternoon.
I'd like to thank very much Reverend Gabriel Burns for coming in. You're welcome to stay for the meeting, though. We quite understand if you have other places to go or other things to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, we have, please be seated. We have ice water at the back, so please, if you're feeling like you need a refreshment, do get some. We also have tea and coffee and cakes outside. Please help yourself. If you top money up in the bucket, you'll find that the cakes get replenished. If you don't, you'll find that the cakes will eventually run out. So it's worthwhile putting a little bit in. Also, since this council has previously voted that we want to get rid of single-use plastics, we aren't providing cups. We do have our own crockery in case you have gotten to bring it, which you're more than welcome to borrow from the Lord Mayor's secretary. If you put a small donation in the pot, we have a selection of cups there. Or if you brought your own, please use that. And we've also changed over to having milk in glass bottles as a way that's more sustainable and better use for the environment. So welcome to that, if you wish to get anything to come in. Now I'd like to move to agenda item 1. Do you have any disclosable pecuniary interest or personal prudential interest to declare in the items on the agenda before us? Please indicate. Okay. Councillor Purvis.
Notice of motion 10C, government targets for house building. I have a disclosable pecuniary interest as employee of a developer. I'll leave the chamber for that debate.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Yeah. Okay, minutes. It's proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by Councillor Jones, that the minutes of the annual council meeting, including the adjourned meeting, both held on 15th of May 2018, previously circulated with the agenda, be confirmed as a correct record. Are the minutes agreed? Agreed. Communications. I've received apologies from Councillor Swan. Is there any other apologies or...
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies sent in on behalf of Councillor James Fleming.
Okay, thank you much. Councillor Swan and Councillor James Fleming. I'd also like to welcome Alderman Frank Worley, who I served many years with on the council, to the meeting. Alderman Worley was, of course, a former council leader, and I think most of us in this chamber will recognise him. Councillor Jones.
Did you say Councillor John Ferret?
No.
I think he's given us apologies as well. Someone mentioned to me the day he wasn't coming.
Okay, so thank you. Just to remind members as well that the meeting is being filmed and broadcast on the web. All microphones are controlled on the top here, so you don't need to worry about turning them off, but you can request to speak by tapping your button. And also remind people that we cannot take photographs of the public gallery or members who are doing deputations without their express consent. So no filming up into the balcony or from balcony to balcony. And just to let you know as well that we do have a timer system for the new members. So after 5 minutes of regular debate, one light will go on and the buzzer will sound. And after 6 minutes, the other light will go on and the buzzer sound, and I'll turn your microphone off pretty much straight away. So you have your 6 minutes, please be aware. And also with regard to members of the public addressing the council today, the webcast will not actually show you, but it will actually broadcast what you are saying. So please be aware of that as well, and think about the language you use. So I hope not. And during that time, the Cam will give a general view of the members in the chamber. So again, please also think about your actions. Attention those members wishing to record proceedings, the council's free rules for filming, photographing or recording members of the public. And evacuation procedures, you know that our evacuation point is by the Queen Victoria statue. Should the alarm go off, we're not due to have a fire alarm today, so take it as real, please. And you're all well aware of your new seating plan as you come in and sat in the back seats. If I hand over to the Solicitor for the deputations.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, there is one deputation received for this meeting, excluding the petition item. It's in respect of item 7, appointments. The details have been circulated in the Chamber. Lord Mayor, may I ask Mr. Jerry Brown to make his deputation on item 7. Mr. Brown, when you're ready, you have 6 minutes. Buzzer will go when you have 1 minute to go, and then again at the end of your time.
Well, thanks for listening to me. Do you know that was one of my favourite psalms that he read, Psalm 121. He that watches Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. What a great psalm. Anyway, a friend of mine spoke to me this morning from Sweden, and he said, you know, when we played you at football, you made a bit of a joke about Swedish furniture not being strong and stable. And then yesterday, your entire cabinet fell apart. So thank you for giving me the time to make this short deputation. The theme's one you're familiar with. Agenda item 7 refers to appointments to outside bodies. The bodies being appointed to are charities and companies, and in some cases both. There are 6 companies on the list. The appointment of PCC representatives is, I believe, intended to ensure that the voice of the people of Portsmouth is represented and to communicate back the direction and performance of that organisation. And that's just right and proper to do so. Yet here we are in Portsmouth with a few items missing off the list. PCC owns a number of businesses, some of them companies and some of them businesses within PCC, and these include MMD, the shipping company, the property portfolio, and Victory Energy Services Limited, and between them they are the biggest commercial assets and liabilities that PCC has. So MMD has a turnover of £14 million a year, give or take, and pays significant amounts of money to PCC in rates and lease fees. And yet there is no independent non-executive director to ask sensible questions like, so where is the marketing and sales director? Or why don't we have contracts with 7 of our top 10 suppliers? Or why are we being overcharged by recruitment agencies? Or where is our 10-year plan? So the property portfolio, I know you'll say it's not a company, it's just a division of the council, but anyway, represents an investment of about £100 million, maybe more, intended to create a significant income stream. Yet, again, there is no independent non-executive director to ask sensible questions like, so just where is the reporting that we promised to provide? Or where is the risk register? The reporting is currently poor, and it needs someone to help the board focus on demonstrating performance with those assets. Victory Energy Services Limited, Vessel, is currently developing its offering, and we've spent well over £1 million, not including the costs of the legal, admin and office space, which we don't count, so far with no income. Yet there is no independent non-executive director to ask sensible questions like, so if this approach has never been tried before, why don't we mention that in the risk register? Or how do we validate the claims of the business plan to be able to outstrip the client acquisition capability of the bigger established companies? Or just where is the public reporting on the progress of this venture and the monthly progress review meetings? Or even questions like, how are we going to deal with the sticky issue of smart meters not working when people switch? These are big ventures, and we continue to run significant risk by not managing them properly. I would request again that independent non-executive directorships be added to the list of appointments from this day forward. And lastly, it's coming home.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. That brings us to the end of the deputations for today's meeting, and I see you've returned to your normal place in the gallery.
Thank you very much. Moves us on now to item 4 on the agenda, which is the petition. The Council received a petition in respect of air pollution as set out on the agenda. The Council's rules state that as the petition contains more than 1,000 signatures, it will be debated by the full Council if the lead petitioner so requests, and they do. And the process will be the lead petitioner, Mr. Tim Shearman Chase, will be given 6 minutes to present the petition. We will then consider the deputation received on this matter. In accordance with the agreed arrangements, the administration will present its response to the petition via a proposer and a seconder. The petition and the administration's response motion will then be discussed by councillors as the normal rules of debate will apply. But please note, as this is a cabinet matter, the full council is precluded from determining issues raised in the petition. And also with tradition, should other parties wish to raise an amendment, they will be given 10 minutes adjournment from the point of the emissions response, if so requested. I will now deal with the petition as presented.
Can I now ask Mr. Shaman Chase, the lead petitioner, to present a petition? You will have 6 minutes. Buzzer will go when there's 1 minute to go, and then again at the end of your time.
Right, thank you. Signatures for this petition were collected by Let Pompey Breathe campaign in just 8 weeks. It calls for Portsmouth City Council to commit to reducing air pollution in Portsmouth to ensure compliance with legal limits and WHO guidelines as soon as possible, certainly later than December 2020, and therefore urgently publish its Air Quality Action Plan for consultation, incorporating quantifiable outcomes to address the city's illegal and unhealthy air pollution levels. I'd like to provide some legal background to this. The Air Quality Standards Regulation 2010 states that the Air Quality Plan must include measures intended to ensure compliance with any relevant limit value within the shortest possible time. The word ensure is critical, as plans need to be realistic, specific and quantified. Also important is the phrase within the shortest possible time, which reflects the urgency of the situation. Previous air quality policies have met neither of these requirements. According to the High Court ruling published in February 2018, steps are to be taken to achieve compliance as soon as possible by the quickest routes possible, about means that makes the outcome likely. They also stated a list of measures which have been carried out, are underway, are promised or are being investigated do not constitute compliance with the Act. DEFRA has argued that their existing plans were proportionate to the pollution problem. The judge dismissed this argument, saying, "I reject any suggestion that the state can have regard to cost in fixing the target date for compliance or in determining the route by which compliance can be achieved, where one route produces results quicker than the other. In those respects, the determining consideration has to be the efficacy of the measure in question and not their cost. And it seems to me that this flows inevitably from the requirements in the article to keep the exceedance period as short as possible. This confirms Portsmouth is legally required to take decisive and rapid action to improve air quality to within the legal limits as soon as possible. According to Schedule 8 of the Air Quality Standards Regulation, air quality plans are to include estimates of the improvement of air quality planned and of the expected time required to attain these objectives. To achieve compliance within the shortest possible time, it is necessary to produce a list of scenarios and to model each based on effectiveness, confidence, speed of implementation, cost and political difficulty. The comparison will identify the most effective and rapid solution, which should then be selected. Without this exercise, Portsmouth City Council cannot claim that they are ensuring compliance, or it will be in compliance as soon as possible. In the Clyde Earth High Court case, it is generally recognised that a clean air zone is among the most effective and rapid means to achieve compliance. Therefore, if Portsmouth plans to achieve legal compliance, it needs to include this option as one of the model scenarios. While the modelling exercise is necessary, it is unlikely any other solution will achieve the local authorities' legal obligations. So I call on the Council to seriously consider a clean air zone for some or all of the city. While these measures are difficult to achieve, it is vital for the good of public health. For more information, please see the Let Pompey Breathe blog, which can easily be found using search engine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Chase. Members, there's one public deputation relating to the petition. This will be from Ms. Kimberly Barrett. May I now ask you to speak and present your deputation? You have 6 minutes, and the buzzer will go when there's 1 minute to go, and then again at the end of your time.
Wrong one.
Thank you. Currently, nitrogen dioxide and particulates PM2.5 and PM10 are a cause of concern in Portsmouth. Most nitrogen dioxide comes from traffic, particularly diesel cars, lorries and buses. Air pollution has been linked to a number of serious health conditions, including cancer, asthma, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, changes linked to dementia, so a lot of causes there. The situation has been described by some MPs as a public health emergency. Health concerns should be an important thought when it comes to the consequences of poor air quality in a congested city. COPD, chronic lower respiratory disease, is the fourth most frequent cause of death in Portsmouth. We have a significantly higher rate of premature mortality due to respiratory disease and of premature mortality considered preventable. COPD early death in Portsmouth is actually significantly worse than the English average, and these rates tend to come from the city's most deprived and poor areas where life is already hard. Maximum permissible pollution levels are specified in UK law and are called the National Air Quality Objectives. Many local authorities, including Portsmouth, have been in breach since the rules were introduced in 2010 for nitrogen dioxide. The situation is particularly bad in North End and Fratton, along the London Road, Kingston Road, Fratton Road corridor, and also in Lord Montgomery Way by the university. Meeting these air quality objectives as soon as possible is a legal requirement for Portsmouth City Council. However, in North End, nitrogen dioxide levels are actually getting worse. On a personal level, my youngest son caught bronchiolitis when he was less than 6 months old, which did mean a scary trip to the hospital and has left him with some health concerns and the potential of asthma developing as he grows up. This does mean for us frequent trips to the doctor and hospital for not just his hearing issues, but frequent chest infections and other issues. For us, this means walking through heavily congested areas such as the junction of Velda Avenue, Rodney Road and Milton Road with traffic idling. It is absolutely awful to hear him coughing and gasping for air whilst walking through these areas, particularly if he is already ill with a chest infection and struggling without the added toxic air. Although the council is reporting pollution levels are reducing, in 3 of the last 4 months of reporting on AQMA9 in 2016, nitrogen dioxide levels exceeded safe levels if annualised, and in January 2017 the NO2 level was over 50 micrograms per cubic metre. The current proposal seems short-term, and a longer-term coherent plan to reduce human and especially children's exposure to air pollution is exactly what's needed here. Take, for example, the school place deficit solution. We've been told that the council is proposing to expand school places at Portsmouth Academy where pollution levels breach national safety limits, whereas a potential more sensible option, albeit expensive, would be to build a new school in an environmentally safer location. The roads in and around the city centre are known to be congested at peak times. Portsmouth City Council has proposed a city centre road scheme to increase road capacity. While the scheme claims to promote sustainable transport, it is still too centred on private car usage. According to the scheme's environmental statement, it will also worsen pollution citywide by 3.4% and will also increase polluted air to above legal limits in commercial road shopping precinct. The scheme is also unlikely to solve congestion as it will simply relocate it to other areas nearby. Without a major design, this scheme should or could be rejected. Although disputed by the City Council, Portsmouth Friends of the Earth kindly provided an air quality monitor to the Milton Forum, Milton Park School, which provided the worrying results of levels of pollution of up to 39.7 micrograms per cubic metre. And please bear in mind that toxic levels are 40 micrograms per metre and above. This is right near to a school with children walking to and attending from the age of 3 right up to 11 years old. This is the air that our children are breathing right now on a daily basis. This is why Keep Milton Green, the Milton Forum and the Milton Neighbourhood Planning Team support the Let Pompey Breathe petition. Portsmouth needs a long-term and coherent strategy to reduce exposure to pollution, especially for children. The CCR scheme requires redesigning immediately with a greater emphasis on sustainable transport to reduce car dependency. Greater priority should be restored for pedestrians and cyclists at road crossings. So therefore, as well as being here to support this petition for the 3 Milton groups, I'm here for a purely selfish reason. I'm here in the hope that this is the beginning of a big change in Portsmouth in regards to air quality, but also in the hope that my children, yours and all others across the city will not have to breathe in these toxic fumes on their way to the doctor, on their way to school, or just being healthy and going out to walk in and out. We owe our children that, and to try and prevent more early deaths, so please consider this petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. May I now ask both of you if you'd like to retire to the public gallery if you want to stay for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Now, in respect of a mover and a seconder to propose a response to the administration's petition, I have already received signed notice on this from Councillor Ashmore, which I understand is about to be circulated. Do you want to wait until it's all distributed before you speak, or? Okay, do you want to start? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yeah, as you see, it's being circulated, the response, but for the people who have come and done the deputations, and if people in the public gallery and our millions and millions of fans at home, I think I'll read out what we've actually got here. Our response says, the Council sincerely thanks Mr Tim Sherman-Chase for submitting the petition to Portsmouth City Council and further raising awareness of air pollution. Portsmouth City Council recognises the unquestionable public health benefits associated with improving air quality. Air quality is a significant public concern, and Portsmouth City Council commits to reducing air pollution in Portsmouth to ensure compliance with all legal limits and target values, and to work towards achieving World Health Organisation guidelines in the shortest possible time. Portsmouth City Council is actively working on an update to the Air Quality Action Plan and the 2018 Progress Report contained within the 2018 Annual Status Report, which will identify actions aimed at reducing levels of air pollution in Portsmouth. Whilst Portsmouth City Council is focusing on all pollution hotspot locations and areas of concern, particular attention is being given to targeting improvements within the AQMA6, which is the Fratton Road, Kingston Road, London Road corridor, as mentioned, as it is within this central corridor where exceedances of the EU and national air quality objectives for nitrogen dioxide are still occurring. In delivering solutions, we will continue working with DEFRA on a targeted feasibility study to identify interventions which will promote improvements to air quality within the AQMA 11, the Mile End Road corridor, in the shortest possible time. However, in line with our own identified local needs, we have already commissioned an extension to this targeted feasibility study to focus on AQMA 6. Both of these two studies will help to inform the development of a new citywide AQAP, the action plan, to continually improve pollution levels. Over the last few years, the City Council has significantly increased the number of sites within the city where air quality is monitored, and this has allowed the City Council to be able to have real readings for the air quality at the southern end of Mile End Road, and able to show the projections by the government of air pollution in this location is significantly lower in reality than the government projections. Further down the road into the city, there are no active data points, and we will need to introduce them here so we can find out if the government figures are right. Perversely, the area of main concern to the City Council, which is the area north of Kingston Crescent up to Stomington Avenue, is not highlighted by the government. And to help public transparency on this issue, I've asked the City Council to show on its web pages the map where all the air quality testing stations are and the results from each of these. This has been done, and I aim for the readings to be kept up to date and public so we can monitor progress towards being within both UK and EU legal limits and also WHO limits by the end of 2020 or earlier. A critical part in the development in the action plan is its consultation and communication with our key stakeholders, as this will enhance the legitimacy and effectiveness of our decision-making processes. A steering group involving residents groups, interest groups, key employers and transport operators has been established to guide the development of the action plan, and invitations to the first meeting to take place later in July have been sent. The Council commit to completing the action planning process by the end of December 2018. Thereafter, actions will be quantified and appropriately delivered. In respect to WHO compliance, our monitoring shows that in 2017, levels in 4 out of the 5 AQMAs are achieving compliance with the annual average NAQO for nitrogen dioxide. We know that only one AQMA, which is the AQMA 6, is currently exceeding the NAQO and WHO guideline levels, as these standards are numerically the same. Portsmouth City Council is currently meeting the WHO annual average for the PM10 guideline values at all 4 of its monitoring locations, and while the monitored annual average levels at our 3 monitored sites for PM2.5 are close to the guideline, we do acknowledge the fact that we are not meeting them, and so continue to commit to achieving these as quickly as possible. The Council acknowledges the actions the administration has taken and what action the Cabinet is planning in respect to improving air quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashmore. Can I just confirm that is seconded?
Happy to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any amendments to the proposed response or calls for adjournment for the come up with amendments? No amendments coming forward? Nope. Okay. In that case, we go on to the debate. I've got one call for a speaker so far, Councillor New.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It was just really to say a few things. First of all, to say a big well done as well to Dave inheriting this, because I suppose where the infrastructure in the city is so old, the width of the roads and the congestion, etc., it's very difficult in terms of actually dealing in the short term with many of these things, and it's very much a long-term goal. So I welcome lots of the things that I heard here today. But I thought it was probably really important as well just to thank the officers who were working, because it is a joined-up approach that's required on this, that is happening through this City Council, that's continuing under this administration. And I just wanted to say a special thanks to Richard Lee and his officers, and also to Pam Turton and to Martin Lavers, who are working hard on this directly with DEFRA, you know, to recognise that there are various things. And what I would say is they have far more sophisticated monitoring equipment than environmental groups have. And so I can understand where some of the friction comes from and people are sceptical. But please do believe us, and I think I probably I'm able to speak on behalf of everyone here, that they are doing everything that they can within realistic timescales to ensure that we do have better air quality. And I just think that it's a very small team doing a lot, working with government, working with all politicians, and we should thank them.
Thank you very much, Councillor New. I now call on Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I won't be long on this. I'd just like to thank the petitioners for bringing the petition before us. I signed the petition myself. I think it was a really good one to see that came to us today, and obviously the response we've got, I think, has broad support from across the councillors, as Councillor News just said. And I'd just like to really say as well, in terms of with my hat on as Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care, obviously good air quality in this city is really important for people's well-being and people's health. So what we can do to involve local residents, local groups into this, I think is going to be really good. So I'm really looking forward to having our air quality action plan being sorted by the end of the year, and really be able to go forwards and make it as good as it possibly can be, so that not just for the next 12 months, but going much further into the future, we're going to have air quality in the city that's going to be much better for everyone. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winnington. I now call on Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to share a couple of things with members that I know some people are aware of, others aren't. Myself, Councillor Stagg and Councillor Ashmore invited the team from the Let Pompey Breathe campaign into the council last week, and they met with ourselves and senior officers relevant in terms of air pollution. And that meeting was primarily just to start a dialogue, and the Let Pompey Breathe campaign in particular had specific concerns around the city centre road scheme that is currently with planning, and that's been echoed today. I've taken away an action to make sure that I properly look at the air pollution side of that city centre road scheme. But one of the other actions that came out of it was around publishing all of our data with the guidelines alongside them. So currently, if you look at how we publish things, we publish them only with the EU guidelines, the EU levels, but we've said that we will now publish everything against the WHO guidelines as well, because it just makes that for easy comparison. So you get 3 lines on a graph instead of 2, or 3 columns in a table instead of 2, and hopefully that just makes things a bit more transparent as well. So I just wanted to update people on that, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dowling. I also have Councillor Stubbs to speak. Thank you.
Just one or two words really, because they haven't come out in the debate, but in terms of the city centre road, the whole point of that scheme is to drive economic growth and economic development. And yes, economic growth and economic development does mean more vehicle movements, because it's partly about having a population increase. We've got to accommodate extra housing growth in the city somewhere, and the city centre is a natural place to do that. And also, if we want the shopping centre and to improve, if we want extra office jobs in the city centre, that is going to generate some vehicle movements, but there has to be a trade-off against this. You can't be absolutist about it. If you're just going to say, well, we're not going to have economic growth unless it has no impact on the environment, and people are going to have to cycle there, and you're not going to get the growth. So I think we need to be very mindful of what that trade-off is.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. We have no further signs of people wishing to speak. Therefore, I'll hand over to the proposer of the motion if you'd like to sum up before we go to the vote.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very heartened to see that everyone seems to be happy with that and on board with that. It's very good to go forward. Obviously, it's a very important subject. And my predecessor, Councillor Rodno, is very right. We should be thanking the officers for that and their hard work that they put into this. And we had a good working relationship when he was the kind of man. I believe it's the other councillor now that's going to be my other one, so I hope we can have a good working relationship too going forward and we can do this cross-party. But yeah, thank you very, very much for Let Pompey Breathe and everyone for bringing the petition so we can have this debate about this issue on air quality in the city right now, and we've all had our say on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashmore. Now we need to put this to the vote. Can I have all those that are in favour of the response, please? Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimously passed. Thank you much. That concludes item 6. We'll now move on to item 7, appointments. I have received notification of a number of appointments detailed on the green sheet, namely Councillor Fielding to replace Councillor Smythe on the Health Overview Scrutiny Panel, and Councillor Coles to become the Langstone Labour representative on the Labour representative on the Langstone Harbour Board. Are these agreed? Oh, so Councillor Jones, you wish to speak?
No, they are actually, but I just wondered if under this item, because there isn't anything else that's specifically relevant, if I could just make the Cabinet aware that the Conservative group is delighted that Councillor Gemma New has decided to take on the role as Shadow Spokesman for Environment and Community Safety, opposite Councillor Ashmore, and that Councillor Ryan Brent will be the Conservatives' nomination for Safer Portsmouth Partnership, and Councillor Gemma New will also be the second representative on the Sea Defences Working Group, which you'd mentioned, and so did Councillor Pitt.
Thank you much. Are all of those agreed? Agreed. Urgent business. I've not received notice of any urgent business decision for today's meeting. Item 9, recommendation from the Cabinet meeting held on 19th of June 2018, police cuts, response following motion referral. Members, a recommendation from the Cabinet meeting which was met on the 19th of June concerning the police cuts motion referral has been previously circulated. I now propose to call the minute. If you wish to oppose the item, please indicate. Can I also remind everyone that any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved? I call minute 21, police cuts motion referral. Okay. Now call for the proposer and a seconder to the recommendation. Can I remind members details of any amendments are to be given to me in writing before commencement of the debate?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think as Chair of the Cabinet, my job is to introduce this, and I'm sure others will speak on it. Just to give people the history of this, and if people find this is on page 25 of their agendas, and the proposed motion came forward in February of this year, and it said the City Council notes the decision of the Government to cut funding to Hampshire Police by 3.67 million for next year, also not provide any funding to cover inflation. This means a real terms cut of £7 million to Hampshire Police by the Government. The City Council condemns this decision and believes this will make local residents in Portsmouth less safe and will mean real cuts to the police. The City Council therefore requests the Leader of the City Council, along with all other group leaders, to sign a strongly worded letter to the Home Secretary to object to this cut and to lobby our MPs to fight for a better settlement for Hampshire Police. Lord Mayor, as I'm sure you will remember, when this came up for debate at the February Council meeting, this was put to the Council for debate, and the members of the previous administration, including yourself, voted to not allow a public debate on this motion and to send it instead to a one-party Cabinet for discussion. I was very concerned about that because it seems to me that this was an issue that affected everybody in Portsmouth, and I understand that the view was that this could be perceived as criticising the government, and therefore there was a wish not to have any public debate. I think we take a different view in the new administration, and we think that the Council's job is to speak on behalf of the people of the city, and therefore we think it's right that there should be a public debate. Therefore we've sent it back to Council to allow the public debate that should have happened in February. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And can I ask, is there a seconder? I think Councillor Madden was, I know. Okay. Councillor Wood, do you second it?
Lord Mayor, I'll second that because as I did before.
Okay, thank you. I've had no notice of amendments, so now the matter is before members for debate. I'm assuming, Councillor Madden, you've indicated you wish to speak, so I'll call you first. Thank you.
Apologies, Lord Mayor, I'm still used to this newfangled way of doing things. Can I say, Lord Mayor, that I had no intentions of standing up to speak to the notice of motion back on the 13th of February, because I thought it was quite a simple motion. I thought it would get unanimous support, and I think I was somewhat surprised that, in fact, it was sent into Cabinet. If you look at the notice of motion, and of course it's on page 25, it's one of the simplest written notices of motions I've ever seen. So there's nothing to complicate about it. There's nothing to ask any questions about. It is, as an old English teacher of mine used to say when I was at school, it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it's all there. There's no questions about it, right? And what it's saying is that what we should do, as Councillor Vernon Jackson said, is to go and ask the government, the Home Office at the time, to do something about it. I just find the one thing I have picked up, which I didn't pick up properly then, was what we wanted to do was a strongly worded letter, Lord Mayor. That's wonderful, isn't it? This is opposed to a weak letter to be sent. But nevertheless, we're always very strong in Portsmouth, no matter what the administration is, aren't we? So a letter to be sent off, how simple can that be? I mean, it's hardly revolutionary, is it? We're not talking about manning the barricades, are we? We're not talking about getting tanks and lawns. We're just saying, could you send a strongly worded letter to the Home Secretary and talk to our other two MPs, or the two MPs for Portsmouth at the same time, to tell them our concerns about these cuts to Hampshire Police? If you actually see, and I saw an article in a newspaper on Sunday talking about what was happening nationally, and particularly in relation to the number of cases that are actually being dropped or not pursued by the police, even though the suspects are known to them. Now, nationally, for instance, there were 1.47 violent crimes last year, or the year before, and over 40% of them, that's 640,000 of those crimes, were not proceeded with, even though the suspects were known. And it is, whether we like it or not, it's a time and a resources issue. But I had to ask why, as Councillor Vernon Jackson said, the Conservative administration at the time would not deal with this very simple issue. And the reason is, of course, as we saw with other notices of motions and other items that came on the agenda, they're concerned to upset anybody with a Conservative or a Conservative leaning. Here is our job, as Councillor Vernon Jackson said, and he is leading a new and a much more distinct administration, I can assure you of that. We are here to represent the concerns and issues that people raise with us, rather than push them into the long grass, or rather not to upset, I don't know, the police commissioner, the Home Secretary at the time, a very good Home Secretary, by the way, who I suspect would be more than happy to receive notice of this or strongly worded letters, because the only way that people learn, in my experience, is by getting some sort of criticism or some sort of feedback. And there is a major concern, Lord Mayor, in this. So I am disappointed that we've had to bring this back, but here it is, and I've no doubt it'll get unanimous support today. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madden. I now call on Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, I'm delighted that this is back here today, and I'm also delighted with the actions that the previous administration took back in February, because had we not have done that, there would have been one debate and one debate only on this issue, and as a consequence of our actions, this is now the third time this is being discussed, because it's been discussed at Cabinet and it's being discussed here. And if you remember, Lord Mayor, going back to February, the reasons that we stated in our response when this motion came forward was because we wanted to be able to do further research and look into the effects of police cuts and police funding issues across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I'm pleased, Lord Mayor, to confirm that the motion asked for a strongly worded letter to be sent to the Home Secretary. And I can confirm, in my previous role as leader of the City Council, that letter was sent and it was strongly worded. But in addition to that, Lord Mayor, knowing that we needed to go further, and in preparation for a response I thought I'd be delivering on this issue, I also met with the Chief Constable. And I also met with the District Commander for Portsmouth. And I also travelled to the Home Office and I met with Nick Hurd, the Policing Minister. And I also arranged for Nick Hurd, the Policing Minister, to come back to Portsmouth. And in fact, he visited Portsmouth 2 days after our last council meeting on the 17th of May at around 11:30 in the morning. And Councillor Vernon Jackson and I met with him together. And we discussed the Home Office's recent serious violent harm strategy. We discussed drug-related harm in Portsmouth. We discussed youth offending. And we discussed initiatives that we are taking in this city to prevent harm and effect to people of Portsmouth. And in fact, he acknowledged the great work that we've done, particularly in trying to reduce youth reoffending rates. In the meeting, we had the Chief Constable and we had Maggie Blythe, our District Commander. And I think it's important that we do work cross-party together. I was delighted to be able to attend that meeting. Councillor Vernon Jackson was very gracious in extending an invitation to me as leader of the council to meet with Nick, the Policing Minister, with him on that day as I had set the meeting up. I also have spoken to the previous Home Secretary. In fact, she and I both spoke at an event funded and supported by Bernardo's just a few months ago when we were talking about harm related to children and particularly around drug-related crime. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be meeting with the new Home Secretary, who many of us in this room know well, being our previous Secretary of State in Communities and Local Government. So I will be supporting the response today. I support the principle of the motion. It is important that police funding is there. I think it's important that the government has sent a clear message, and as leader of the council previously, I have not shied away from sending strongly worded messages and letters to the government where required, particularly when I felt that services and local government were being affected. So I welcome the motion. I'm just so disappointed that Councillor Hunt isn't here to debate it today.
Sorry, ex-Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Councillor Madden, you say you have a point of order.
I have, Lord Mayor, in relation to what Councillor Jones said, she said she actually sent a strongly worded letter. As a member of the City Council, I've never seen it. She was also asked to consult with the other leaders of the groups, or the other group leaders. I don't know if that's happened. It seems not. So, could we see this strongly worded letter?
Apologies, Councillor Madden, you're quite right. I did say that as if I sent it after our last meeting. In actual fact, I sent it just before the meeting, and I will share a copy with the whole council.
Yeah, I think that settles that point of order. I now call on Councillor Stubbs next on the list. Thank you much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So we've heard all about the February meeting. Well, one of the things in the February meeting, I wanted to submit an amendment to this, and it was ruled out of order. And my amendment, as well as changing some of the contents further down, also would have corrected some of the factual inaccuracies in this motion. But it's one of the interesting things about this council, isn't it? So I was told we're just going to, I'm changing the bottom bit and I'm changing the top bit to correct factual inaccuracies. Therefore, it's negation. Therefore, you can't put that forward as an amendment. So because the original motion was factually inaccurate, I was unable to amend it, which is an interesting situation. The bit that's factually inaccurate was when it talks about 3.67 million reduction in resources to the police force next year. That is untrue. Funding for police forces from the Home Office, for every police force in fact, are exactly the same to the pound in 1819 as they were in 1718. There is no cash reduction at all. It's a fake fact. The reality of it is that it's the same. Now, we also had a situation where police commissioners could increase the preset by £12, which in this area worked out at somewhere over 7%. Most of them did that. And if you add those two bits together, you ended up with an overall increase in resources somewhere over 2%, 2.5%, something like that, which is roughly the rate of inflation. So to say that police forces got a big reduction this year is just untrue. It's not factually correct. And, you know, I thought you can't pass a motion, I don't think you can anyway, pass a motion which just says something which is just factually incorrect. And, you know, the meat on this about demanding more money from the government, well, you know, that's not really that strong, is it? I mean, you know, it's always of the view again that, well, the government could just print some more money up. You know, shouldn't take it in taxes, presumably, but the government could just pump the deficit up and it won't have any consequences. But, of course, a higher deficit does have consequences. We all pay for that, for inflation, through lower economic growth and so forth. And, of course, there is always the option, you know, if you really believe that more resources are required, you could have called for a council tax referendum. You could have called for people to have to pay more in taxes in order to fund the police. I wouldn't have supported that, I have to tell you, but it is something you could do. I mean, to me, I think, you know, that what we actually need to do in this country about policing is we need to look at the efficiency of it. That is the first thing, because we can't even tell if it needs more resources now or not. What we do know is an awful lot of time is wasted on red tape, and until that has been taken out of the system, you know, I find it difficult to see why we need to put more money in. We need to concentrate on doing that, because if you just say, let's throw money at it, you'll never take the waste out of the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stubbs. I now call on my namesake, Councillor Hugh Mason, please. Thank you.
My Lord Mayor, I think there are matters of principle here. The first one is that we've got ourselves into a logical mess in that the previous leader of the council did send a letter, and the rest of the members of this council were not aware of it. I think there is a principle here that if, in response to any matter which is brought to this council, the leader of the council takes action, councillors should be aware of it. The second is a matter of how we actually deal with central government. And I would like to take it from the negative. What message would have been taken by central government had we not made some form of complaint? Had we not made complaint, central government would have turned around and said, oh, well, none of the councils seem to have objected. If there is something which is causing our residents concern, if there is something which is causing us as their representatives concern, which is a matter for central government, it is only right that we should make that known to central government. So we had no option, I think, but to write to the Home Secretary about this matter. And I'm very glad to be informed this afternoon, late though it is, that this was done so. Because this is a matter which really does concern our local residents. It concerns them in 2 or 3 ways. One, there is a fear of increasing crime. Secondly, there is a concern about people being harassed on the streets, that there is aggressive begging in our city. There are beggars who, not so much the passive ones, but there are aggressive ones. There are people who are afraid to go out late at night because they don't feel that our streets are safe. There are concerns which we have, which people relate to the cuts in police, and it is right that we should do so. The people are also concerned that our Police and Crime Commissioner seems to have a rather loose handle on the finances, spending money or suggesting to spend money on items which are not directly related to the safety of people in Hampshire. So, my Lord Mayor, I believe that the matters are matters which the City Council should concern itself with. These are matters which we should write to government about and make sure that government knows exactly where we stand on it. And they are also matters which, if action has been taken, this should be brought fully to the attention of members of this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. I now call on Councillor Fielding for what I believe is his maiden speech. So.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the motion, but I think it's plain to see that it's come a bit late in the day, somewhat, since Portsmouth Labour has been campaigning on this for a number of months and at least the last year or so. What we're seeing is the city has seen a 10% rise in crime and has lost 1,000 officers, with Hampshire Constabulary's budget set to be slashed by a further 25 million over the next 4 years. As the Police Federation have said, cuts have consequences. As I've already said, Portsmouth Labour already campaign on this, fighting the police station closures, working with small businesses which have seen 200 incidents in the past year. And I would like to point out that our MP has already written a series of letters to the Home Office raising these issues, and have also raised them in Parliament on a number of occasions. So I think it's clear that we're bringing things forward as best we can, and thank you very much.
Congratulations, Councillor Fielding, on your maiden speech. I now call on Councillor Wood, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to take exception to what Councillor Luke Stubbs said about we need to measure what's going on. As a ward councillor of one of the constituencies that has a sea bordering there, during this hot weather, we've been inundated with people causing a lot of trouble, and clearly the elephant in the room has been that the police don't have the numbers or the methods to be able to deal with it effectively when you get all those people there. Now, that's been getting worse over the previous years. So I think, just let me quote something here when they said that we don't have him anonymous. Dear Rob, further to X's email, I entirely agree with the content and support the urgent need for significant increase and improvement in the police patrols and the monitoring of activities of groups of youth who congregate and cause trouble in Old Portsmouth. It is indeed shocking when you return home to see that the windows have been smashed in your own home and your neighbours. Now, that's occurring all the time. And clearly right now, when it's a few people dealing with that, the police and the partnerships can deal with it. But when it comes to big crowds or similar like that, we do not have the numbers. I'm totally in support of the fact that we should follow up with the police. The point is we need to feel safe in our homes, and a lot of people are writing to me and they don't feel safe. So we need to do something about it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I now have Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Again, something I have to take exception with Councillor Stubbs about. And again, it's a very quick intervention here. But he talks about, my Lord Mayor, Councillor Stubbs talks about waste in the police and red tape. I rather think it's an interesting time to raise that when, of course, one of the reasons why this motion was brought back earlier in the year was about the waste that the Police and Crime, the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner was doing on spending all that money that he was putting in extra on his precept into his office and not frontline policing. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is what waste looks like, as was brought up at the Police and Crime panel, as was brought up by the vast majority of members of the Police and Crime panel, of which the vast majority are Conservatives. So if they could see it, and yet this council cannot, and if this Conservative party on this council talks about waste, and yet they do not stand up against what is clearly waste, whereas what we need is money in frontline policing. So I'm really happy with the fact that we had an opportunity as an administration to say that we support the original motion and that it should go forwards. And it's just a shame that so far down the line it's come back, whereas we should have been stating something on behalf of the people of the city so many months ago. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Winnington.
Just to come back to Councillor Winnington now, and I did not say anything in what I said about defending actions undertaken by the Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm talking about waste and inefficiency in the totality.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stagg, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm reading now from a report by the chairman of the Hampshire Police Federation, who says that funding for the police comes from two sources. One is from the government, which is the larger amount, and the other is from council tax, which is a much smaller amount. And the words are, the national funding formula is grossly unfair for Hampshire Constabulary. This year alone, we are almost £50 million underfunded because of a formula which is unfair. Over recent years, the Chief Constable, PCC, and myself, as a Police and Crime Commissioner, and myself have lobbied hard for the formula to change. Frustratingly, this has not happened, and any future changes do not look hopeful. And it goes on to say, the cuts made to Hampshire Constabulary are eye-watering. We've had £80 million of cuts from our budget, which means we have almost 1,000 fewer officers to deal with an ever-increasing demand. The Chief Constable has recently announced a further £10 million cut for 2018, which will see our roads policing capability slashed, our public order team disbanded, as well as other areas affected. This will not keep our public safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stagg. Since I have no further notices to speak, I call on the proposer of the motion to sum up, please, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm pleased that it seems as if we have a cross-party view that we should be doing this. I'm disappointed that this was not allowed to be debated by the Conservative administration in February, and it seems slightly bizarre that the reason why you stop a public debate is you think there should be more public debates. Just have a public debate in the first place. And it's so, my Lord Mayor, I hope that we will all be able to write as group leaders to the Home Secretary. I haven't seen the former leader of the Council's letter, and it would be very nice to be able to see that, but I think if we're able to do this jointly, to be able to say what the view of the city is would be good. But I think this is one of the things where I think our administration may be a little bit different. I remember with great sadness the decision of the previous Conservative administration not to lobby to stop cuts to the fire service here in Portsmouth. And the decision of that administration was that they didn't think that it was right for this council to try to lobby on behalf of the people of Portsmouth about blue light services. Our view then was that was not the right thing to do. That our view was and remains that one of the functions of the council is to try to make sure that we speak up for the people of this city. The consequence of the failure to lobby on behalf of the fire service was that Southsea Fire Station took the biggest cut of any fire station in the whole of Hampshire, while councils that did lobby on behalf of their fire services were successful in reducing the cuts. So Gosport received a lower cut than it was proposed, and likewise fire stations up towards Southampton. So, my Lord Mayor, I think one of the differences that we will try to bring is to try to make sure that when there is the opportunity for this council to speak on behalf of the citizens of this city in defence of services that are so vital, that we do take the opportunity to do that, and we try to do that across party with a united view. And therefore, my Lord Mayor, I think it is unlikely, if not impossible, that we would ever say that a motion comes forward to try to speak up for the residents of the city and the services they receive, that we would boot it off to a one-party committee to stop debate. So, my Lord Mayor, I commend the motion to you. I regret the fact that it was not debated in February, but I hope that we can have a united view now. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon-Jackson. Point of order, Councillor James.
Thank you very much. Allegations have been cast against previous administration, the Conservative administration, which is simply untrue. And I think, Lord Mayor, there is a very wise saying, it's about the boy who cried wolf. And the reason why the previous Conservative administration was so much more effective and was absolutely off the scale in comparison to the previous Liberal Democrat administration in achieving things and getting things done is because we picked the right battles. And actually it wasn't that we didn't campaign for funding for Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. It was the fact that it was simply about the area ladder platform not being fully crewed, and every other area ladder platform in this county was not fully crewed for the previous 7 or 8 years. Ours was fully crewed simply because of the Copner Fire Station cuts back in 2007-8, and that's exactly what Councillor Vernon-Jackson knows, and because we pick sensible battles, we got better outcomes, and he is going to pick every single battle, and guess what? He won't get as much achieved as we did.
I think that was very much verging on the edge of a speech rather than a point of order, so I think this is your warning, verbal warning not to repeat it. Hopefully we're not going to get the same again.
No, my Lord Mayor, just to say just to say, my Lord Mayor, to thank for the intervention and to hear a second speech and not to be barracked by her colleagues is a real difference from the previous performance of the Conservative group.
I think we'll go straight to the vote now. All those in favour? All those opposed? Any abstentions? That seems to be carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We have 3 notices of motion before us today. Each one must be formally moved and seconded. So, notice of motion A, proposed by Councillor Stubbs and seconded by Councillor Ryan Brent. Is it formally proposed and seconded? Thank you very much. In which case, you now have 3 minutes to persuade the Chamber to want to debate it today. Thank you.
Oh. Well, I hope so. But I will go to say a few words. I mean, this is obviously, it's a fairly self-explanatory motion. And I know as a member representing a seafront area that I regularly get complaints in the summer period about people staying in motorhomes overnight and parking on the street. And really part of the purpose of putting down this motion is that Bournemouth have taken a somewhat different approach. Bournemouth have signage up which say in their town centre and then their tourist areas there are signs up about no overnight parking. Now, just to give you a bit more information, what they've actually done there is they have a traffic regulation order which limits the parking of vehicles designed for sleeping. So you can't use parking policy to regulate whether someone's sleeping in a vehicle or not, but you can regulate types of vehicle. So a vehicle adapted for parking is a camper van. So it would basically say you can restrict the parking of camper vans in certain areas at night. Now, of course, you could still sleep in the car. You can't deal with that through parking policy. So that is something they've done in Bournemouth. I appreciate there's complications on actually doing this sort of thing in practice. There's locally registered vehicles to consider. There is the enforceability to consider. But I'm not, this motion doesn't seek to put down solutions. What I really want is I'd like the Cabinet to have a look at that, and I hope that's something we can agree.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stubbs. Can I see those in favour of debating that today? Anyone opposed to debating it today? That motion is carried, so therefore, Councillor Stubbs, you have 6 minutes to propose your notice of motion.
I think I've covered it for the moment, so I will see what comes up in debate, and if there's anything further, I'll deal with it in the summing up.
Thank you much. Do we have any?
I have no notice, Lord Mayor.
We have no notice of amendments. Therefore, we move straight to debate.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very sensible proposal. We will look at it. I know the particular issues down the far end of Eastney, where I think there was a sign telling people they weren't allowed to camp, but somebody nicked it, and then nicked the camera, so that we have now got, as I understand it, a camera in a fenced area which is owned by the university, so nobody can't nick that one. And this seems a sensible thing to have a look at, and I know there's been concerns raised across party about this, and I'm sure we'll be happy to look at it. Oh, in fact, we are already looking at it, but welcome this opportunity to say so.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson, and I'll call Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Just to thank Councillor Stubbs and Brent for bringing this forwards. It's obviously a concern for myself, Luke and Jenny in Eastney and Craneswater in particular, where we've got the issues down at Eastney, and I do know that injunctions are being sought against the excuse me, against the people camping down there and using it. And Councillor Vernon Jackson is correct, and because my understanding is if there's no sign saying that you can't park there, then you can park there. And of course, so if it's vandalised and taken away, then it puts severe problems on it. But it is an issue, and not just at Eastney, but also we've got a Canoe Lake area where there has been further down Henson Road, and I know going right along the seafront all the way to Old Portsmouth and in St Jude as well. So I really welcome that, and I hope that we can make a movement to some kind of solution and get some ideas and take best practice from Bournemouth. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winton. I can imagine a lot of our no parking signs will be disappearing overnight now. So, calling Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I did intend to speak on this one, members, but it sort of ties in a little bit with the processes that we had with the previous notice of motion, and the fact that we had to go through a vote to see whether we were going to debate it or refer it to a one-party committee. Now, actually, we've decided to vote on this and debate it today and refer it to a one-party committee to make a decision. But actually, within standing orders, although Councillor Vernon Jackson in the last one was very gracious and say they wanted to bring it back to the City Council, it actually has to come back to the City Council anyway. It has to come back within 3 scheduled council meetings. Now, for some of those new councillors, I'll just give a bit of background to that. That actually, back within 3 scheduled council meetings or earlier, was introduced on the back of a notice of motion back in about 2009-2010, which I believe was tabled by Councillor Donna Jones and Councillor Jim Fleming about televising council meetings, which the then administration, led by Councillor Vernon Jackson, decided to refer that one to his one-party committee, and it sat there for about 5 years before it actually came back. But what I would ask, Lord Mayor, through you if I can, is that if this comes back in 3 council meetings' time, the amendment so that it didn't get booted into Councillor Madden's long grass, is that we actually try and bring this back earlier, because effectively we're talking about something coming back December, January time at this rate. And clearly the issue that Councillor Stubbs and his ward colleagues have is probably largely centred around the summer and autumn months. And I think we need to be looking at this a little bit sooner if it's heavenly possible. And I'm sort of looking at Councillor Stagg, because she'll probably have the say on this, so that we can actually move to alleviate the issues that are down there sooner rather than later, because I doubt whether the residents in Eastleigh Craneswater are quite happily going to sit there until we actually get to the back end of January before actually deciding something, if we actually decide something when it comes back, because quite clearly a response to the notice of motion will come back, and then it will probably go back to the Cabinet Member of Traffic and Transportation to introduce all the appropriate TROs. We go through the consultation, and we'll be lucky if we get this in May next year. So could I ask through you, Lord Mayor, that we try, if it's humanly possible, to perhaps get something back for maybe the October meeting as best, or ideally the one after that, so we can address this issue sooner rather than later, and not see it booted into the long grass by a one-party committee, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I'm just going to call on the Democracy Manager to clarify some issues.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As requested, you asked me to clarify. The issue about referring back within 3 scheduled meetings only relates to matters that aren't actually debated. If they're referred without discussion, they are obliged to come back within 3 scheduled meetings. If you have a proper debate like you're having today, there is no obligation if it's a Cabinet decision, which of course this is.
Thank you very much. And since we have no further applicants to speak, I'm going to hand back to the proposer to sum up, please.
I don't know if there's much to add, Lord Mayor. I mean, I think that there are sort of 2 different problems here. There's certainly a problem at Ferry Road, which is not adopted highway land, and therefore the legislation is all going to be different. There's also a lesser but nonetheless ongoing problem in other areas of the city, particularly around the seafront. Obviously, there's always been problems in both areas. It's got a lot worse around towards the Hayling Ferry this last 6 months or so. I'm not quite sure why it struck us now, but it has. And my impression, and I'm not sure I'm right in this, but it is my impression, is that the number of camper vans in other areas of the city has climbed this year as well. And it's sort of a bit of a worry, isn't it? Because when we look at what happened around Ferry Road, it sort of got worse, and then it fell off a cliff edge when suddenly everyone thought they could go and do this. And it's one of the things that worries me a bit, is whether we might be going to see something like that in other areas of the city next year if we don't do anything. So I hope this can be looked at. I'm very pleased with the positive response I've received.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I see all those in favour of the notice of motion? All those opposed to it? And any abstentions? That's also carried unanimously. Okay, he doesn't count because he wasn't there to vote, but I will move on to notices of motion B, Armed Forces Veterans, proposed by Councillor Wellington and seconded by Councillor Stagg. Is it formally moved and seconded? In which case, can I give the proposer 3 minutes to entice the rest of the chamber to wish to debate it today? Thank you. Oh, that's it.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The motion is based on the SAFA report that some of you may have seen, which came out a few weeks ago, which painted a very concerning picture about the situation with veterans in the country as a whole. But I thought it was also important for us to have the chance to debate a motion which shows the good work we do in the city with our veterans and with our serving service personnel and their families. And also recognising that over the years, central government, and this goes back 20, 30 years, central government has made it very difficult for us to deal with specific things for our veterans with some of their targeted cuts that they've made to local government funding. So really, I'd love to debate this today. I think it'd be really good for us to all get together and support the motion and show what we say, what we are doing, what we want to do in the future, but also to say to central government, both now, in the past and in the future, that we really need more support to do the very best that we can for our veterans and their families, and also looking for our current service families, current service people and their families, because they're going to be our veterans of the future. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winton. Can I have a show of hands, all those that wish to debate that today? And all those opposed? In that case, it's back to Councillor Winton for, if you'd like to propose the motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. So in the city as a whole, we have around 8,000 veterans who are registered with local doctors, and that's how we measure that. And they're an important part of the life of the city, alongside, as I say, our service families and our service personnel, both when they're on deployment and when they're at home. The SAFA report that is alluded to here shows some really concerning points of view. So out of the 1,000 people that they spoke to, over a quarter of them were actually on the streets, which was, or were homeless, which was an absolutely terrifying figure. Over 75%, so over 3/4 of the families involved were having serious money issues. And really it did show that in many ways there is a very big neglect for service families, not because of what we do locally, but because of policies and because the transition from service life to post-service life is very difficult. However, it's not all bad news in terms of some of the figures. Interestingly, veterans are more likely to be in employment than the population as a whole. So 82% of veterans are in employment, as opposed to 75% of the 16 to 64-year-olds in the general population. However, when you come to unemployment, it's actually the reverse. The unemployment rate in the country at the moment is 4.1%. For veterans, it's 10%. It's more than double. So that really shows that where veterans really struggle, that's where they're missing out on the support that they need, and that's often where the problems are. I was actually fortunate enough earlier today to go, it was upstairs in one of the view meeting rooms, to meet some veterans who are doing a course that's been supported by the City Council, where they're looking at getting support to get into work with their CVs, with their money management and things like that. It was really encouraging to see. Some were from the city, some were from outside, and they were from different service backgrounds as well. So there were some naval veterans, there were some army veterans as well. Because it shouldn't be forgotten that though we are a naval city, a lot of the veterans in our city are not Navy veterans. We have quite a few army veterans and even some Air Force veterans as well as our Navy veterans. Because this is a city which has a strong history of people leaving it to go into the forces, whatever they might be. So in terms of government funding, over the years, as I said, there have been some of the funds that are very helpful for veterans have been taken away from us by central government. As I say, this is going back over decades. And unfortunately, one of the things, as I said in the motion, is our cut in public health grant this year by £470,000. And because the issues that we fund out of public health, which I've stated, so like alcohol support and mental health support, that is often the areas that when veterans are in need of real support, those are the areas that they come out in. So really, I really want to promote what we're doing, and that's why the last paragraph in terms of our resolution is about the positive work that we as people in the city, so that's both the council but also our residents as a whole are doing. But it's also to make sure that we keep fighting and keep bringing up our veterans' health, and also recognise that what affects veterans are also in many cases the things that affect people in day-to-day life. So I commend this motion, and I do hope you'll be able to support it today and support the work that we're doing with our veterans in the community, fight for a better deal for them from central government, and also support everyone who helps veterans as well. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winton. Councillor Stagg, do you second this, and did you wish to speak at this point?
I will speak now. PCC very proudly agreed to sign the Armed Forces Covenant in 2012. We were very, very pleased to do that. The Covenant clearly states all veterans should have priority status in applying for government-sponsored affordable housing schemes, and support should be available for all service personnel in order to assist their transition from service to civilian life. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't happen in the city. But the questions I'm asking are both of these available to armed service veterans in Portsmouth? As signatories to the Covenant, do we ensure that they happen? Are any of the homeless people in our city armed forces veterans? I don't know what the answer is, and I think what we need to do is make sure that nobody is slipping between the cracks. It is estimated that nationally between 7,000 and 13,000 ex-servicemen are homeless in the United Kingdom. Now, why is that? Many ex-service personnel suffer from PTSD, but it's not the only thing. They may have other mental health problems resulting from a number of complex causes. Difficulty of adjusting to civilian life is one of the things. Loss of the support and structure that the military family provides, and it is a family. Breakup of relationships and families because of long-term separations. And I know what that's like. My ex-husband was in the Navy, and it was hell when you're on your own with small children, and that puts a stress and strain on relationships. Lack of roots due to moving around, so there's no support network, because if you move from city to city, as so many service personnel do, and of course the very big one, post-traumatic stress disorder, but that's not the only thing. Service personnel, particularly men, and I'm not being sexist here, so please don't think I am, but many particularly find it difficult to seek help. They are, after all, service personnel. They are strong. If they show any sign of weakness, if they need help, that is a sign of weakness which many can't cope with. In addition to all of this, over 30,000 armed service personnel have lost their jobs since 2010 as a result of cuts. Being made redundant doesn't do much for one's morale or for one's mental health. This myriad of causes leads to many veterans turning to alcohol or drugs, resulting in a downward spiral, and that's why many of them end up on the streets. So when the problems experienced by armed service veterans are continuing to get worse, what does the government do? It cuts funding to the areas for serving personnel and veterans and their families, the support that the individuals and groups need, such as homelessness, money advice, substance abuse support, mental health support, by nearly £500,000. There are charities in Portsmouth, many of them, such as SAFA and the Veterans Outreach Support, which meets on the first Wednesday of each month in the Royal Maritime Club in Queen Street. They're doing a fantastic job. I know several people who've come out of the armed forces, many of them with PTSD, and they have been saved, literally saved, by that particular group. But these charities and others need more support so that no ex-service personnel fall between the cracks. And government ministers need to do more than pay lip service to help and support those who need it. We are a military city and proud of it, and consequently we all have an obligation to our veterans. So I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stagg. I now call on Councillor Hooper, who is also doing a maiden speech today.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start off, please, by thanking Councillors Winnington and Stagg for raising these rudimentary points around this disturbing disconnect among newer armed forces veterans who feel increasingly alienated in wider society. The opening lines of your notice of motion summarises with clarity what I've experienced on many occasions, But ask yourself this: why do such deep feelings of deep-rooted alienation exist, fueled by a sense of flagrant betrayal, as some would put it? I say deep-rooted because multiple sources are fueling this estrangement, causes which must be confronted to enable an understanding of what has gone terribly wrong, or maybe it was never quite right. The band-aid of slapping more cash on this gaping wound will not suffice. Yes, more money is helpful, but only if it directly benefits veterans, isn't squandered, and is fused with essential adaptations to wider society's whole approach to ex-service people. So what else could help, other than throwing cash at this issue? To understand that, we need to deconstruct this disconnect so we know what has gone wrong and why. Our country undoubtedly acknowledges that veterans and their families need support with issues like homelessness, money advice, alcohol support and mental health support, as the motion here today decrees. However, other fundamental issues need to be explored that are causing veteran dissatisfaction, and that will require a revolution of attitudes and cohesive strategies that are targeted and deliverable in order to combat this disconnect. Beyond the points this motion raises, veterans are feeling disenfranchised because the civilian mindset they return to isn't always welcoming. An example of this is accessing employment opportunities. I have lost count of the highly skilled ex-career soldiers I've spoken to who have found this process humiliating due to the problems they encounter. One former WO1 bluntly told me, "Some civilians are threatened by us and our abilities. I've been made to feel like bottom of the pile when applying for jobs, demeaned and patronised. Why should someone tell me I'm only worth minimum wage when I've led men, had the responsibility of making profound decisions and absorbed huge pressures? I've had to dumb down my CV to secure a job. I feel totally degraded." Therefore, a strategy is needed to ease this process of gaining meaningful employment through fair recognition of the profound skills and qualifications veterans possess. They are an asset to any workforce given their core military values and training. Just ask BT. Therefore, a job of a fitting calibre is an essential source of pride which will ease the assimilation back into civilian life. Do not underestimate the importance of this. Please also consider that there is no other industry that ejects highly trained professionals in their early 40s, leaving them to play catch-up with the rest of society. Let's level the playing field and give our veterans a leg up and not a thump down. Coupled with this, another overt problem is the confusing process that awaits veterans when they seek help. Many I've spoken to have found themselves lost in a system, confused, frustrated, dazed, and put on some perennially rotating waiting list or seeking an appointment that's achingly slow to manifest. These circumstances would be problematic for anyone, but when layered with the burdens of managing health issues, finding employment, money concerns, a housing problem, or the fact you have just lost a big part of your identity, mean that exasperating bewilderment and numbness are the inevitable outcomes. As a society, we need to simplify this process and make it much easier for veterans to access support, as well as making sure the boots-on-the-ground smaller charities get their fair share of funding. Outreach services in Portsmouth are already doing an excellent job in offering drop-in sessions, but upping the visibility of any support services will also be advantageous. Help can also visit you as well as you visit it. We have adopted this ethos in Paulsgrove and have identified where many of our veterans are located. We've also found that acknowledgement is a very powerful tool, as it tells the recipient, you are valued. Pride and damage can also be inhibitors when a veteran needs help. We have recently found such a man. Therefore, support structures need to be more fluid and proactive. Awareness and kindness are also key concepts. This now brings me on to the most compelling point of all, one emphasised with disdainful contempt by veterans I know as friends, colleagues and acquaintances. They feel discarded, disrespected and in some cases actively attacked by factions of society. And who would blame them feeling this way when we consider the witch hunt of criminal prosecutions against them amongst many other factors? A revolution in manners and attitude is needed to halt this damaging effect. This doesn't cost money. It is created by conspicuous efforts to show respect and apply some care and common sense, even in the way this country legislates. I have met many veterans who don't have any problems apart from not being afforded the respect and recognition that they deserve. In some ways, this is the most damaging aspect of all, as it is the source fueling bitterness, hostility, disenchantment, and a disconnect that threatens to become irreparable stalemate. I thank members for listening to my perspective today and hopefully understanding that cash is merely one factor in improving outcomes for our veterans. Having just returned from the Ypres salient, I would ask citizens to remember the ghosts of those battlefields, the 183 cemeteries in this area alone. By paying our respect at remembrance each year, we thank them for their sacrifice and the gift of freedom they've bestowed. But beyond that, the greatest legacy we can now create is to look after their modern-day counterparts. They're men and women who live amongst us and who have come from the same proud tradition, separated by time but not principles. Can you say no to supporting veterans? They've had enough of the on the bus, off the bus. And it's just over the hill, lads. The ball is now in our court. Thank you.
Congratulations, Councillor Hooper, on your maiden speech. I now call on Councillor James, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, this is very timely, particularly with the celebrations that we had last month in this country, or the commemorations, I should say. And on behalf of my colleagues and I on this side of the chamber, I would like to say how proud we are of the work that we have done over the last 4 years to not talk about helping veterans, but to actually get on and do it, because we do believe that actions speak much louder than words, and that's the feedback that we have had consistently from veterans across this city. We put money in our budget, we made arrangements, and we set up the first ever Armed Forces Day that the city has ever celebrated. We hope that that will now continue. It is a day to commemorate the fact that Portsmouth is the home to the Royal Navy, and as we've heard from a fellow member in the chamber today, it's not just a naval city. In fact, originally, as you so often tell me, Lord Mayor, Portsmouth was originally an army garrison. And therefore, we do have mixed services, predominantly army and navy, in this area. Whilst the Armed Forces Covenant was signed in 2012, it wasn't actually until later, under the Conservative administration, that the Council was awarded its Bronze Award, submitted and was awarded its Silver Award, and has recently just submitted for its Gold Award after the work that has been done specifically over the last 18 months, supported by staff and Armed Forces personnel across the area. I'm also delighted that under the Conservative administration we agreed and put the funding and preparations in place for the first ever Falklands flag raising ceremony. And at this point I would like to put on record our thanks to both Steve Sedgwick and Barry Jones, who not only are they Falklands veterans who are really committed and feel very passionate about the plight made by so many from this city who travelled to the Falklands to defend part of the British land interests over there. But they are also members of our staff. They're both traffic wardens, and whilst they are often not the most popular of people in our community, on that particular day during Falklands flag raising, they were really true heroes. I also now want to share with the chamber, and for people at home and in the public galleries watching this, share with them some examples of the things that we did to not just talk, but actually do. Under the Conservative administration, we put and amended our housing priority criteria so that veterans were given specific assistance and support on the housing waiting list, because we think that's particularly important. And we did that following case studies of veterans suffering with PTSD and where there is so often marriage breakdown. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Like Councillor Stubbs, I have visited veteran outreach support on a number of occasions. In fact, our former Lord Mayor had Voss as one of his charities, because so strongly do we feel about it. And the work that is done at veteran outreach support is unique. It is outstanding, and it has had recognition from within the Ministry of Defence, and particular with the members of Parliament who are members of the government working within the MOD. Secondly, we went a step further. Rather than guaranteeing people an interview if they applied for a job here, veterans, we guaranteed them work experience, because we understand the challenges when you've been leading a platoon of men, maybe up to 200, you went into the army at the age of 17 or 18, you've done that job for 25 years, you have a whole host of skills, but on paper, when your CV is received by Portsmouth City Council, what are you qualified to do? Well, actually, we know they're qualified to lead teams. We know they have the emotional intelligence and the proven track record to be able to manage difficult situations, to be able to work with people, and to be able to be a trusted human being. And that's why, rather than just simply offering them an interview, we offer them time to come and work in this council for a couple of weeks so we can assess if they're happy with us and we're happy with them, and if it's a good fit. And I've got examples of where over the last couple of years, rather than somebody coming in to apply to be a traffic warden, we actually thought they had compassion to work with children or to work in a different part of the council. And therefore, after a week or two, they've transferred across to a different vacancy where they were very happy with us and we were extremely happy with them. Finally, because of the recognition that we have received through the Ministry of Defence, and I'd like to place on record my thanks to the government here and to Penny Mordaunt, our MP for Portsmouth North, who is herself a Royal Naval reservist and former Armed Forces Minister. We have received recognition and we have been asked to speak at national events. Both myself, Councillor Jonas has represented the council at events both in Parliament and locally down here in Hampshire, and we have had recognition for the work that we do. And when you go to events, and such as we were at last week at the Local Government Association Conference, and you go to the Armed Forces stand, and when you say you're from Portsmouth, they sit up and they listen and they congratulate you. And that's exactly what happened last week when you and I walked past the Armed Forces stand and lingered to have a word and say what a great job they were doing. And we were met with a very warm response because we are a compassionate city that really has rolled our sleeves up and done and not just spoken about supporting veterans.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Now call on Councillor Coles, who is also, I believe, a maiden speaker. So.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. As a former serviceman of the Royal Navy, I can appreciate the unique position in which those leaving our armed forces find themselves. Upon leaving, veterans can find the adjustment to Civvy Street a difficult and stressful time, and many suffer from the culture shock of moving from a regimented and disciplined lifestyle to the non-service world. I myself struggled a while when leaving the Navy, would have benefited greatly from the principles listed within the Armed Forces Covenant had it been in place at the time. I believe those men and women who have chosen to lead a career in the defence of our nation deserve the very best when retiring from active duty, and I'm glad the Council recognises this within the motion, the importance of welfare for both serving and ex-service families. I would like to place on record my admiration and thanks to the brilliant work carried out across the city by local charities to support ex-service men and women, and as a councillor, I would like to get alongside them and support residents in my ward who are ex-service personnel. I also back the call by Councillor Stephen Morgan MP in his letter to the Defence Secretary on Armed Forces Day for the government to give the Armed Forces Covenant more teeth and expand the scope of its practical elements, lest we risk the Covenant's value being confined to the symbolic. I'd like to offer my support for this motion, however, with one caveat. I note that the motion calls for the Armed Forces Champion to provide a coherent plan to deal with the issues listed as part of the budgetary process. Since Councillor Vernon Jackson is now both Lead Armed Forces Champion and Leader of the Council, it is imperative that he be held to account by members on this point, as he holds the budgetary responsibility, and it is vital this not be brushed under the carpet when the budget comes around. I would lastly also like to ask Councillor Vernon Jackson whether, as Leader of the Council, he will be able to find the time to do the role of Armed Forces Champion justice. Surely our armed forces deserve better than a part-time champion. Thank you.
Congratulations, Councillor Coles, on your maiden speech. I now call on Councillor Morgan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Our nation's veterans are without doubt exceptional men and women who loyally serve their country, committed to excellence, duty and public service. They have done so often in hostile and challenging environments, demonstrating selfless sacrifice and bravery, in many cases suffering serious injuries. For that reason, I welcome the introduction of the Armed Forces Covenant back in 2011, and it was a privilege to work with a number of local authorities in adopting it back then. The principles of the first covenant still hold true 7 years later, ensuring no disadvantage to any current or former member of the armed forces or their families in the provision of public and commercial services, and special consideration in some cases appropriate for those injured or bereaved. The covenant has undoubtedly made a positive difference to service personnel and their families, and marks an incredibly important commitment to countless brave men and women in our nation. Yet in 2018, I fear that in too many instances, this commitment is still not being met, as research tells us that 1 in 5 veterans are surviving on less than £7,500 each year, and 70% say their abilities are not truly valued by employers. Surveys also tell us that 62% of veterans feel undervalued by society. That is completely unacceptable. The jump to civilian life is still consistently underestimated, and too many businesses remain ill-equipped to help breach this significant gap and unlock incredible potential and unique skills of former servicemen and women. So I thank all those organisations who have already signed our local covenant for their great work so far. The initiatives of those signed up are crucial, and that's why I will continue to listen to local views and raise issues both here in the Council and in Parliament. And for this very reason, on Armed Forces Day, I wrote to the Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson, to nationally recognise all the good work we're doing here in Portsmouth and make sure covenants across the country count. The covenant does need more teeth, and for the government to expand its scope so that local authorities can do more. We need better mentoring schemes, training not just for veterans, but for employees, increased investment to reduce unacceptable waiting times for specialised mental health services, and extended transition periods to ease the move into civilian life. Without these, we run the risk of the covenant being confined to the symbolic, as Councillor Coles has just said. But, Lord Mayor, this isn't just a job for one single champion. It's everyone's task. By working together with words and deeds, we can really make a difference, helping service veterans reintegrate, not only back into civilian employment, but also back into wider society. As a city, we should never cease in telling our veterans how proud we make them, how they make us, and immensely value how they are. There is clearly an urgent need to show them too. My Lord Mayor, the Labour Group will be supporting this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morgan, and I'll call on Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Just a few quick points about on this. I think it's a good motion and recognise some of the really significant problems that people leaving the forces face. And when I talk to friends and colleagues who have done the transition, it is a very, very difficult thing for some people to do. I look around the council and there are some people who have managed the transition extremely well and some who don't. We've had one person who really couldn't cope with the transition and always tried to salute me. But others, when I went last week for networking breakfast with members of the City Council, people who worked at the City Council, ex-forces or connected with the forces, most of them you'd have no idea they had been in the forces. They have done the transition so well. But there are increasingly large numbers, as the research says, for whom that is not so. And I think we have a reasonable record, but clearly we need to do more to try to make sure that we value people. There's not only the symbolic, and Armed Forces Day, giving an ability for all people who have served, all veterans, to march through the city is an important symbolic thing. But actually trying to make sure that we look at the issues around housing and education are extremely important. One of the problems service families talk to me about, and I've attempted to try to resolve this at a national level, is if they have a statement of educational need for a child and they then move, that statement of educational need for that child doesn't move with the child. The next council where somebody is stationed has to start the whole process all over again. Now, this is a very simple thing that government could cure, and yet they haven't done so. And I've spoken to ministers, I've spoken to the MOD, and yet they still don't appear to have got the message. I think one of the things, there are couple of other things that I think I find difficult. Several years ago, I tried to do a piece of work with the MOD because the resettlement programme, as people leave the forces, is patchy. Some people seem to say it's great, some people don't. And us in local government, we have hundreds of thousands of jobs, and the skills that people have from the forces are really valuable to us in local government. If we see people who come to work for us from the forces, they've got enormous skills. And I found a headhunter who was prepared to put on, at their cost, no cost to the government, sessions for people coming out of the forces to understand what jobs were available in local government, because there's masses of different jobs. And I went to meet people at the MOD, and they were just not interested. And I'm really worried that since that service has been outsourced, since it's no longer career civil servants and ex-forces personnel doing the work, they just go through the motions and they're not as good as they should be. And we need to hold governments and all governments to account for that work. I think the other thing that I would like to see us develop is we now have an affiliation with all of 40-odd ships in the Portsmouth flotilla that are based here in the city. We have a home port affiliation with all of them. And I think we need to be doing more to try to address that. One of the pieces of feedback I have is for service families who are left at home while the breadwinner who's in the services is deployed. It's a really isolating experience. And I think we as a City Council have a responsibility to those families to be able to support them whilst their loved ones are away, deployed often for months and months at a time. So I hope that we'll be able to do that. Finally, to answer Councillor Coles' thing, under the previous administration, Councillor Frank Jonas was the Armed Forces champion as Cabinet Member for Resources. We've been told that to make sure we get our gold accreditation, the Armed Forces Covenant champion needs to be a Cabinet Member, and so therefore I've taken on that role. But I'm extremely grateful that Councillor Frank Jonas has agreed to act as my representative when I'm unavailable, to spread the load and to make sure it's cross-party. And that's the way in which I will always want to try to work, to try to make sure that we work as hard as possible together and we do have the maximum impact on service families. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. I'll now call Councillor Stubbs.
Just a hodgepodge of little things. I think, you know, probably all of us really have been agreeing with the thrust of this debate so far. I certainly would agree with one of the things Councillor Vernon Jackson said just now, where he said, or at least I think he said implicitly, that the Ministry of Defence should be doing more about the transition out of the services, and they should make this a greater priority than they do. I certainly would echo that. On the education matter, just one thing to bring up. I get this as a ward member, I'm sure others do, but the service families often transfer in and out during the school year, and of course many schools, particularly primary schools, are at capacity, which means that if you come in, I don't know, October, let's say, the school is full. And so then you're in the invidious position of having to send perhaps a primary school aged child a couple of miles away. I've certainly had that happen with families living at the far end of Eastleigh who have been allocated school places in Cotner. Now, of course, there's no easy solution to this because the real problem is that the schools are at capacity, and you can't really say, well, we'll hold spaces open just in case something turns up. But it is nonetheless a problem, and it's something which hits service families massively disproportionately. And in terms of things that the council has done recently, I think it is worth also remembering that back in April this year, the Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson, did come here and was introduced and met with former servicemen and veterans and so forth, and I think that is very positive. So when we have the opportunity to from senior figures in the government, either political or senior civil servants, is to make them aware of the issues and put the issues in front of them is a positive thing, and it is something that makes a difference, and it is something that's happened in the recent past and I hope will happen again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stubbs. I now call on Councillor Robert New.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's really nice, isn't it, to see when everyone's in agreement on lots of things. And I think we've got a lot to be very proud of in terms of the Armed Forces Covenant and being a maritime and military city. And also to pay tribute, I suppose, really to the people who work hard within this chamber, actually championing the armed forces, and specifically some of the smaller charities that have been mentioned earlier today. Okay, you could argue it's a very sad state that some of these smaller charities are the ones that are actually doing a lot of the donkey work to pick people up, to support them and to help them. But actually, it's quite important. And one of the things I've found, certainly through meeting some of these charities, as I'm sure most of you will agree, is that it's because they've been there as armed forces personnel, and then they've come out, they've either experienced complex needs, PTSD, that it's given them the drive. When they've come through on the other side, when they've eventually found support and help, that they've then been determined to set up an organisation to try and help others. Because I suppose, as other people alluded to, it must be like losing your family when you are together 24/7, sharing in everything, whether that's work-based stuff and then leisure stuff and the mess, etc. And one of the great joys of being a councillor, I think, is being able to meet some really diverse people that inspire you. And I would actually just like to say and mention one specific small charity, and it's someone who Councillor Joe Hooper and Councillor Gemma New are working very closely with, and it's Gary Weaving from the Forgotten Veterans. I was privileged to meet him earlier on this year, and it's one of those things where you kind of like try to knock back tears when they're telling you the heartbreaking story of what they've been through. But importantly, it's about the empowerment that he's got. Now, he's doing that on a shoestring budget. He is helping real people, bringing them back from the brink of suicide. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And on that note, a little shameless plug. This Saturday at Paulsgrove Social Club, Councillor Joe Hooper and Gemma New have organised a fundraiser to support Gary and Forgotten Veterans UK. Please do come along and support if you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor New. I think I'm attending that as well, so added bonus, you get to see me. Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was almost reluctant to get up and say this because I think there's wide consensus across the room. We all do our bit as best we see it, as best we're able to support veterans and service families in this city. And all I was going to bring to actually Councillor Stubbs' attention was back in 2012, our group moved an amendment to the protocols, fair access protocols for schools, which include a definition of hard to place children, which will include children of UK service personnel who are about to move or have moved to or within accommodation in Portsmouth as a result of services deployments and consequently cannot otherwise obtain a school place for the school which has a catchment that contains their accommodation. Now, I'm sure the then administration, which is now the present administration, didn't realise that was within their protocols that actually stopped that happening. But I had a bit of a fight to get it through, but they accepted it in the end. And I think that's true with all branches of government. Sometimes they are oblivious to the things for which they are responsible and can sometimes impact upon service personnel life. So I point it out not to be critical, but to recognise that life's not always easy for any branch of government, and sometimes things take a while to put in place, but the sooner we recognise the problems and put the correct solutions in place. It's easy to point out problems, it's finding solutions that's the tricky bit, and I would commend that to the council, that, sorry, I'm sticking to the papers here, that we support the notice of motion before us and recognise within ourselves we all feel the same way. None of us are perfect. We all do the best we can. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weems. Having had no one else signal to speak, I now call on Councillor Willington to sum up the debate, please.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, and thank you everyone for their contributions to the debates. I'd like in particular to start with the stuff that Councillor Hooper said, and congratulations on your maiden speech, especially about the employment opportunities and taking the skills into account. I think that is absolutely critical. I remember I used to work for the civil service, and some of my older colleagues, or colleagues who have been around for a very long time, so joining in the 70s or even one or two in the 60s, which was rather terrifying. But some of their, they've been there for a very long time. But they've been, when they joined the civil service, actually a lot of their colleagues were ex-service personnel. So a lot of the office managers at the time would have come straight out from being officers or senior NCOs in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, and they came straight in to become managers and everything. So right back then, there was actually a central government pathway into employment, which doesn't really exist anymore, though a lot of service personnel do end up in public sector employment. But I think that again shows how the central government has lost their way in terms of that transition work. They should be doing much more, as Councillor Vernon Jackson said, as Councillor Stubbs said, and as others have alluded to in this debate. And I do think we have to do far better in terms of saying to central government when this is having that impact, that we do need that support locally. So things that we've done, that we are doing locally. So some people have mentioned some of the charities in the city. There's actually 40 charities in the city that works with veterans and service personnel, which I think is quite extraordinary. And it does show, again, the great goodwill and the great work that people do in this city. And again, that goes back to in our motion, I think it was so important to recognise the work that so many people do with our veterans and our service personnel and their families. I was very fortunate Friday before last to go to the first anniversary, as I know Councillor Hooper and a few others were as well, at the Joining Forces first anniversary from AGK. What a fantastic scheme that is, and what a difference that's making to veterans. And it was brilliant to be there. But interestingly, the funding they've got for that is for 3 years. 3 years, I think? Yeah, 3 years. So it's not ongoing funding. So again, this is one of the things that central government is selling short on. It's giving short periods of funding, and then they're going to have to find, if we want to continue these things, we have to find ongoing funding. So whether they go out again for bids for funding or whatever. And I think that's, again, something that central government really needs to pick up on rather than what they're doing at the moment. And finally, I just want us to remember that the vast majority of us have got veterans either alive or passed away now in our families. Both my grandparents, my mum's parents were both in the Wrens and the Navy. They actually met during the war. And I know how much my granddad in particular never talked about his experiences and how painful that his service was. If there'd been better, he had a successful career as a painter and decorator, but I know he struggled a lot with what he'd seen in the war, and I think it just brings home to me that if he'd had the kind of support that is available now, maybe his life would have been better, maybe he would have been able to talk about things. But it's more to the point of, if it was like that for my granddads, I think about the people today coming out from for the armed forces. We do what we can in this city. It is a cross-party thing. We've got our champion and his representative. I thank Councillor Stephen Morgan MP for his support and Labour support for this as well as the Conservatives and obviously the Lib Dems. It really has to be all of us who work together on this, do the very best for our veterans, but also for our serving personnel. We cannot forget them, because they are our future veterans and their families are as important to us as they are to them. So I commend this motion. I thank everyone for their support on this today. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Winton. If we now move to the vote, can I have all those in favour? Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? In which case, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Since we seem to be making progress at the moment, I'm going to keep going without having a break yet. But if we start getting irritable, we will have a break. Moving on to final motion C. Is motion C, government targets for house building, proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson and seconded by Councillor Saunders.
I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. In which case, you now have up to 3 minutes on the question only as whether the motion should be put today or not, to entice everyone.
I think it should be debated today.
A nice short... Can I have all those in favour of debating it today? Anyone opposed? That's carried. In which case, you now have 6 minutes to introduce the motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I just thought it was so obvious that we would want to debate this that I didn't want to use another 3 minutes up. My Lord Mayor, I bring this motion to you because at the Cabinet we had a report that came to us about how we're going to need to redo the local plan. And my thanks to Councillor Judith Smythe for coming to that meeting, as somebody who wasn't a member of the Cabinet. But the way in which the City Council is going to have to provide space or land for housing in the future is changing. And I thought it important to come here because actually I think this is an issue that crosses all party divides, and I think we'd all want to have a chance to be able to have a say on this. Because this is something that's going to affect the city for years and years to come. We all know that building houses in Portsmouth is not always popular with local residents, but I'm I'm confident, and I will go and defend the need to build houses to meet the needs of the housing needs of residents of Portsmouth. And therefore we've had a target that the government has given us based on locally produced statistics about what the local need is here in Portsmouth. And that's a bit over 500 homes a year is what we need to build. But my concern is that the government is changing the rules. The government are changing the rules to give us a centrally produced target that is unrelated to the local definition of need within Portsmouth, and is saying to us that you here in Portsmouth must build 868 new homes a year in this city. And colleague, I don't need to remind you, but I might need to remind colleagues in London, in the ministry, that actually Portsmouth is constrained on 3 sides by the water and on 1 side by the hill. We don't have unlimited land. So, my Lord Mayor, the only way all these houses can be put in is by trying to make sure that we cram and cram and cram. Now, I think that's entirely unacceptable in terms of trying to protect the quality of life of local residents, trying to respect the infrastructure that we need, the transport infrastructure, the health infrastructure, the educational infrastructure. But it's also, in my view, entirely unrealistic. At the moment, in Portsmouth, we're completing about 400 new builds a year. And yet the government target is 868, over double what is being done. And the City Council can't go to private house builders and say, you will build more. We just don't have that power. But if we don't achieve these targets the government is setting, then the government has threatened, not only our council, but councils around the country, that there will be consequences for councils who don't. And the consequences are that the protection that land has in Portsmouth, through our local plan, would be removed. So land that this council has protected from residential development in the city would have that protection removed, and we go down to the MPPF levels of protection. Now, I don't know what it's going to mean for individual pieces of land, but it removes protection from residential development on areas that we think we want to protect, to make sure that the quality of life for people in the city is protected, but also that there are employment prospects here in the city and that we're able to be economically active and create wealth. So, my Lord Mayor, I think we need to be speaking with one voice, if we possibly can, to say to government that we can accept and we can achieve realistic targets to make sure that we are building the homes that local people need. But we shouldn't have imposed upon us an externally produced, unevidenced target, which is completely unrealistic in terms of delivery, but has the potential to mean that land in this city, which is currently protected, would not be protected from development in the future. So, my Lord Mayor, I'm happy to move this and hope that we will be supporting the motion. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vernon Jackson. We have an amendment before us. Do we have any others come forward? In which case, can I ask that happy for the amendment to be circulated? Yep. If we just spend a second for that to go out and then... I think to save time, I think Councillor Coles is happy to propose it while it's being distributed. So,
I formally propose the amendment.
Do you wish to speak any more than that?
No, I reserve the right to speak on it.
Okay. Thank you. Can I just check, Councillor Fielding, you second that?
My Lord Mayor, I formally second that.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders, you get first refusal to speak next since you are seconding the main motion.
I should defer my right for first refusal until later in the debate, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much.
I think we're happy to accept the amendment.
So that's been seconded into main motion, but I've got Councillor Jones, first person to signal speak, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I mean, I do welcome this motion, and you know, I have written over the last year to the Housing Minister when the revised MPPF requirements came out, and our housing target went. It used to be at 14,500 homes we had to build over the next 20 years. Then it went up to 18,300 after we did the push spatial strategy high-level planning work. About 18 months, 2 years ago, which is actually led on behalf of PUSH by Claire Upton-Brown, as it happens. She's the principal planning lead on that committee. And then revised again more recently up to 19,900 and whatever the figure is that Councillor Vernon-Jackson has referred to. You know, I think it's all very well and good when you're setting these policies and when you're setting the criteria of how housing numbers will be assessed when you're sat in Whitehall and you don't understand the local pressure, demographics, space. You know, we are the most densely populated city in the United Kingdom outside of the capital. We are unique in that we are the only island city in the UK. We cannot go out on all sides. We can only really sort of go up in height or northwards because we have water surrounding us. We're already considering a super peninsula for Tipner West, Horsey Island, one of our city deal site. And so actually for us to be building outwards as many towns and cities can means reclaiming the sea, which is extremely expensive to do and would make it completely financially unviable. I thought that sort of the 18,000 number that we had 18 months ago was going to be extremely, extremely tough. And as sort of, you know, the Cabinet Member for Planning Regeneration, Claire Upton-Brown and I worked very closely over the last 18 months on where we thought those numbers could go and where strategic housing sites could be, you know, put into the local plan as we are going through a significant local plan update, a 1 in a 10-year occasion, which we're doing at the moment. I did have the benefit of getting an update this morning, and actually the motion here, which is effectively saying right to the government to tell them that the way they've worked it out is wrong and that they need to be appreciative of our position, I completely support the motion. I also will, you know, I'll be happy to vote and support the Labour amendment. It makes some very good points, particularly around different classification of housing demand or over supply, I should say, in the city. So I think it's a good amendment, and I think it just firms it all up a bit. So happy to support that. But actually, without wanting to criticise, because I will be supporting this, because the essence of what it's saying I completely agree with, but actually it is slightly outdated because the government is very fast moving at the moment, as I'm sure you're all aware, and we had a new housing minister appointed yesterday in Kit Malthouse, who is somebody that many of us in the chamber know very, very well as a North Hampshire MP, and as I say, I've known Kit for almost 15 years, and I did send him a congratulatory message yesterday, and I will be speaking to him, but before his appointment yesterday, after Dominic Raab moved and was promoted upwards, the Ministry for Housing and Communities and Local Government had already made a decision that through the National Policy Planning Framework, the MPPF, they appreciated that on some areas, Portsmouth being one of them, our strategic housing need was too high and frankly not deliverable. And so they have they've gone out and consulted, and in September a new formula is due to be adopted by the MHCRG through now Kit Malthouse, if he continues with that, which would mean that for some areas of the country it might go up in an adverse way, but for us we are very confident that that will bring our housing target down from 19,900 because it will be done on a much fairer and more scientific calculation. And that's why when the MHCRG were out for consultation on the new formula, we supported it hook, line and sinker because we knew it would be to our benefit. So actually I think that what will end up happening is that in September a new formula will be adopted by the government, which will mean that the housing need will have reduced from 19,900 1,500 down to, I mean, I can't speculate, but it may be 16,000 or less, who knows. I do still think we've got uncomfortable conversations to be had with neighbours, Fareham, Havant, potentially other councils, about where we are going to get to. But if the number does come down to somewhere nearer 16,000, actually, in our local plan, I think the last number I had from Clare Upton Brown, we were at 14,500 to 15,000 earmarked-ish of where we could go in a strategic housing site allocation in the new local plan, which is due to go out for public inquiry next year. So, you know, I think to the proposers of the motion, Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Sarnes, very important, to Councillor Dowling as the executive lead now for this area. It's a big job, it's a huge job going through the local plan update, and I think it's important as members of the City Council that we fully appreciate the impact and the effect of the government, the proposed and suggested government changes due to come through in September, and I will be writing to support to Kit Malthouse to urge him to continue with his predecessor's plan for adopting a new formula for housing need.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. And the day of maiden speeches, I now call on Councillor Smythe for your maiden speech, please.
My Lord Mayor, thank you very much. I'm extremely grateful for Councillor Vernon Jackson and Councillor Donna Jones for supporting our amendment. What I have written here is a hot defence of the amendment, which I will try to modify as we go ahead. Many of you will know that I've spent much of my working life driven by a passionate about social, affordable public housing. Without decent houses, many of the services we provide, such as education itself, public health, the health service itself, and substance abuse and domestic violence, doesn't have the impact it deserves. We can't help families properly when they're in housing stress and homeless. Housing supply, particularly the supply of genuinely affordable, high-quality social housing, is vital to our city and our economy. It's vital to the many people on our housing waiting list, those stressed by insecure, overpriced and poorly maintained housing, and the generations to come who, at the moment it looks, will not be able to buy their own homes. These people have been let down by Tory governments who failed to build enough housing nationally and have raised rents for social housing and introduced policies to reduce the share of new housing which can be built by local authorities and registered housing associations, registered social landlords, year after year. The motion we have to consider, the reason we suggested the amendment, we thought the motion wasn't ambitious enough. In our amendment, we've replaced positive about the prospects of building affordable housing with committed to building and developing affordable housing. We also add at the end of the first paragraph that our ambitions should be based on objectively assessed housing need as set out in the most recent strategic housing market assessment, and that's where the proposers of the motion got the figure 584. And we agree that we would want to resist any changes to that until we've completed the housing need assessment currently underway as part of the housing plan that will feed into the update of the Portsmouth plan. And here you're going to learn something else about me, which is I am a town planner, and I do believe that due process of plans that are properly consulted is how we should make policy, trusting the technical advice we receive. This motion is therefore also premature, and the second amendment that we made was about it being so important that we develop our local plan, supported by all the other plans that are going into it, in a way that it will be strongly supportive of affordable social housing developments, allowing the council and registered social landlords to develop ambitious and exciting housing schemes. And I hope the plans will recognise that there's already an oversupply, for example, of overpriced student flats, which actually wasn't even consulted with the university by the private developers who put those up, and reduce the number and concentration of student HMOs, which certainly many people in my ward find very difficult, regulate and raise standards in the private rented sector, and ensure high standards of design and energy efficiency for new and refurbished housing across the city. Whilst no change of government can increase our supply of developable lands, Councillor Vernon Jackson described that situation well. We are, as the motion says, an already overcrowded island city. An incoming Labour government, and you know, who knows what's going to happen after this week with the chaos of the cabinet. We will increase we need to increase the supply of genuinely affordable, properly regulated housing from a range of sources, removing the developmental, institutional and financial barriers which at the moment conspire against the poorest and most vulnerable in our country and our city. So thank you for you all supporting the amendment, but that's what I think why I think you should.
Congratulations, Councillor Smythe, on your maiden speech. I now call on Councillor Hugh Mason.
My Lord Mayor, I'm one of those people who actually likes formulae. There are not many of us, but I'm one of them, especially if they are well constructed, because a well-constructed formula makes for fairness across the country. There are problems, however, with the formula for housing. It is not one which is well constructed, and it does need a considerable amount of revision. But even when that occurs, we may well find that there are outliers to the formula. There are exceptions to it. There are things which are important, which the formula, because it is general across the whole country, has not taken into consideration. And I think the peculiarities of this city, which we all love, are those which may well be outliers from any well-constructed formula that the government comes up with. And that will produce a number of risks for our city. And if we look at them, first of all, it means that we are short of land, and there will be a pressure on us, I suspect, to build where we can. And that might mean taking land which should be kept for employment, should be kept for the jobs of people in the city, just in order to build houses on them, in order to meet our targets. And that is a risk which we must be aware of if we are going to resist it. The second risk which we face is that although this is not one of the richest cities in the south of England, land prices in this city are pretty high. And this is going to make it difficult, especially since the council is limited in its ability to plan and insist on its planning for affordable houses. It's going to make it difficult to produce affordable housing, whether produced by the council as council housing, which I think we have a very proud record on all sides in this city of producing, or whether it is private housing. There are great difficulties in finding enough land at a reasonable price to provide affordable housing. So these are the considerations which I would urge the Leader of the Council to put into the letter which he proposes to send to the Secretary of State. And following on what I said earlier in this afternoon's meeting, I would request the Leader of the Council to ensure that a copy of his letter is made available one way or another to every councillor, so none of us do not know what he has written to the Secretary of State. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. I now call on Councillor Stubbs.
All right, thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'm going to be, like others, I should be happy to support this motion. I think some of the sort of phrasing on it is a little bit, not misleading, but a little bit incorrect. But I understand what you're trying to get at with what's been put forward. And the way it's incorrect is because it's not true that there's a nationally set housing target. There's a nationally set way of working out housing need, and that is the starting point for deriving the target, but it is not the target. You have to show whether that number can be met or not, and if it can't, can it be met elsewhere in the region, or in the sub-region. So I don't think we're going to end up with a target in the 800s. I would certainly hope not. I would expect and hope the administration will put forward a case for why physical constraints of this city do not permit that, and then take that to a planning inspector. And that has been achieved on occasions. It's been achieved in this region by Brighton, by Gosport and by Chichester, all of which are able to cite constraints about why they don't have sufficient land available to development, and I think we need to look at making that sort of case here. There is actually a logic in having a national formula, and not just the one that Councillor Mason put forward, but because you see in other authorities there's been challenge after challenge where developers have said, actually, you've come up with this methodology, we're saying it's that methodology, therefore you don't have a 5-year land supply, therefore you have to allow our greenfield development to go through. And that has been making planning in greenfield areas has been making it into a bit of a fiasco. Having a national formula, or a formula which cannot be challenged by developers every single time on appeal, is strengthening the planning system rather than weakening it. I think the thing that worries me the most in the Planning and Housing Act is the deliverability test, to ensure that it rises, but it will be, if you're not doing 65% of your target, then you end up losing planning powers, and specifically what that would mean in this city is the power to protect employment land from housing. You would not have grounds to refuse planning permission for industrial land for housing if you drop below 65%. And partly off the back of that, I have to take issue with something that Councillor Smythe said, actually, because when referring to student accommodation, well, yes, a lot of student accommodation has been built, and that counts towards our housing target. That is why we're not starting in a deficit now. Because if we didn't have those 5,000 student rooms, which we're counting as 1,000 properties, we will be, touch and go on the 65%. We'd already be in that hole, and we're not. And I think that is a positive thing. It would also mean, of course, we didn't have student accommodation, we'd have more HMOs, because the council doesn't set the number of students that the university has. The students will still come anyway, and if they can't be accommodated in specialist student housing, then they have to be accommodated in general purpose housing. So far as the matter of affordable housing goes, I mean, obviously, this has been a concern for us all for some time. When we were in administration as a Conservative group, came up with 204 units. It is difficult to do development, particularly as a council. The rules around it are not easy, and they've been harder still in the past. In 1998, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, a grand total of 50 council properties were built across England. So, this is the reality of it. We've had a situation, certainly under the previous Labour government, where the plan was not to permit any further council house building at all, and to encourage changeover to housing associations with clear pressure on that in the rules, that you could get big grants for property estate refurbishments if you did that, and you could not if you did not. So overall, I think the motion is sensible. I'm quite happy to support it. I mean, I don't know how it's going to get on when it makes its way out to government. I suspect we're going, the policy is going to be the policy, but I do agree that it's an important issue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stubbs. We now have Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have to say, generally, I have no issue at all with the original notice motion. I have a few concerns about the amendment, but I recognise that it's been accepted into the overall notice, so I will address both issues at the same time. As members will be aware, a little while ago I was portfolio holder for housing, and at that time there was a housing white paper, and as the portfolio holder I invited all members to write to me so that I can incorporate their comments into the letter I was writing to the government. I'm pleased to say I did have a couple of responses from the Liberal Democrat group. Sadly, I had none from the Labour group at the time. And I did incorporate their comments into my comments to the government. And one of the things I did write at the time was that Portsmouth is a coastal city, built mostly on an island, and is one of the most densely populated places in Europe. As an island, it should be no surprise that most of it is built at or below sea level, and a majority of it is in a flood zone, although there is sea defence work. The total area of Portsmouth is just over 40 square kilometres, and it has just 8.5 square kilometres, that's 21% of it, as open space. Of that, 2 square kilometres are sites of special scientific interest, with a further 1 square kilometre being reclaimed from the sea by use of landfill or waste. In other words, none of those can be built on. So that leaves us just 5.5 square kilometres that could be built on. And then I went on to say, should it be no wonder that This city has the lowest playing pitch provision in the country per head of population, which stands at 209,000. Even those few playing pitches in Portsmouth cannot be developed, as they provide feeding grounds for Brent geese, an endangered species, and this has been cited in the past as grounds for refusing planning applications on appeal. So I went on to say, it must be clear from this very quick sketch of Portsmouth that there is almost no greenfield sites left to develop, and that to construct more housing it must be done on brownfield sites. Unfortunately, due to the city's history, many of these sites are badly contaminated, and although zoned for development, builders and housing associations deem them not viable to develop. To address the shortage of space, much new development is in tall multi-storey buildings. However, this is a conundrum for the city, as to assist our economic development, the demand is actually for 3 and 4 bedroom houses, both in private and public sectors. I think those 2 paragraphs there sum up the issue that Portsmouth has. We do not have the space readily available for new housing within the city. And Councillor Jones is right. And Councillor Stubbs is right too. If we are to contribute in any way, shape or form, the only way we can do it is building on land that we own outside the city. So, first Lord Mayor, I think I'm grateful to members of the Liberal Democrat group who did respond at the time. I'm sad the Labour group didn't respond at the time. I recognise it was smaller, but nonetheless they had the opportunity. And I'm sorry to take issue with Councillor Smythe as well, especially as it was her maiden speech, and I still did applaud, even if I disagreed with elements of it. Because quite clearly you said, you know, past socialist governments have built local authority housing and past Conservative governments haven't. Well, the actual figures are, Mrs Thatcher's government, I think probably if we went back past then it'd be too far in deep history to be able to tell, but Mrs Thatcher's government built 346,360 local authority homes, which compares fairly favourably, I would suggest, to the 1,970 built by Tony Blair's government in all the years he was in office, or 810 by Gordon Brown. So please don't lecture our group or any party about building local authority housing. Certainly this administration, or sorry, the previous administration to this one, built 200 local authority homes, actually more per in the, Tony Blair's 190 number works out 197 a year. So the 200 we built was more than Tony Blair's contribution per year. So please don't talk to me about that. And then I have to say, I have some issues, and as I say, I'm sorry that the administration has chosen to accept the amendment into theirs, because certainly it does seem contradictory to me to say we want to reduce the number and concentration of student HMOs, yet at the same time say we'll criticise the new student blocks which do exactly those things. There's a contradiction there in what you've asked for and within your amendment, which I find disturbing, and you need to think through that argument, because clearly if by building those student blocks we liberate terrace streets in your ward and other wards in the city, it liberates them for family dwelling, which is what people do need and want, and which is what we have been trying to achieve. So, Lord Mayor, I do support the amendment, the notice of motion originally. You cannot and you should always approach each government frequently, because certainly I wrote to a housing minister. He's sadly no longer there.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I think I've got Councillor Chowdhury who needs to make an urgent statement.
Yes, I got few property as a landlord, so I think is a particular interest I should leave the, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, Councillor Smythe, you've been trying to do a point of order.
Point of order, I didn't mention the differential building rates of successive governments in my speech at all. And I do know that Councillor Stephen Morgan, our MP, has raised this matter in Parliament on a number of occasions after the consultation.
Okay, and Councillor Dowling, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is, after being councillor for 4 years, this is the first time I've actually said this statement, but I wasn't intending to speak on this item, as I know that Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Sanders kind of knew and understood the issues, but I just wanted to come in to respond to a couple of bits that Councillor Jones said. Don't worry, I'm not going to complain, I'm actually agreeing for once, and also pick up on some of the bits from Councillor Smythe. So I agree with Councillor Jones on 2 points. Firstly, I think she's absolutely right that the anticipated announcement in September probably will mean the housing target goes down. So I think that is a positive thing for the city, and absolutely fingers crossed. However, something else Councillor Jones pointed out is that government makes moves very quickly, and as we know from the last couple of days, also changes very quickly, and there is a long time between now and September. So I think that's why it's important to bring this motion forward now and write this letter now, because who knows who might be the Minister for Housing and Local Government come September. Probably the same person, but we don't know for certain, and he's only slightly into the role. So there's something to think about there. So I think it's important that we still move this forward now, despite the anticipated reduction in September. But thank you for highlighting that. I think that is important. Councillor Smythe, completely, it's been accepted. I think most people agree with the possible exception of Councillor Weems down there. Just thought I'd make a note for all councillors to be aware of on the issue of HMOs, particularly student-related HMOs. I'm currently in conversation with my equivalents as well as planning officer equivalents in other local authorities who have universities, particularly in Plymouth, because unsurprisingly this isn't an issue that is only faced by us in Portsmouth, and that's a positive and ongoing conversation, but I'm hoping that by the end of the summer there'll be something more significant to be able to tell people about, and I look forward to being able to do that. The last thing I would say is that obviously as an administration, as my understanding is that all administrations of the City Council have been, we do have a commitment to building affordable homes, whether that's affordable as the government official definition or affordable by the literal definition. And I also look forward to being able to tell people about potential, not tell people about potential, I think there is already potential, but tell people about definitive plans for affordable housing coming forward in the very near future as well. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dowling, and I have Councillor Sanders, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's always interesting when we all violently agree with each other, but it's always very pleasant when this happens. I think the idea behind this motion is just to outline the reality of the situation, really, which is that we need more homes, particularly more homes people can afford. And I use that definition because, as Councillor Dowling has rightly outlined, Lord Mayor, the government's affordable housing approach is frankly unaffordable for many people in this city. And that's why it's important that we have a balance that reflects the need. And having been in conversations with Councillor Dowling and with housing officers over the last 2 days, I know pretty much that that's the sort of approach that we will want to offer. But it's not just that, it's also that people want communities, not concrete. People actually want to live in a real environment, not a concrete jungle. It's a very difficult balance to strike, but it's very clear from listening to people that actually what they want is they want homes they can afford and also communities and environmental spaces that are important. And that's why we were very clear about including things such as employment land and green and open space. And the difficulty with that balance, particularly in a city like this, is when the government or the regional planning body tells you how many homes you should need. Now, the regional planning body employed a consultant from London to offer up a needs target, which is the 730 homes per year, 16,100 over 20 years, which was put forward. Now, you may think we could deliver that, and I know Councillor Stubbs is always very keen to talk about deliverability of things. So I note in paragraph 17 of the Cabinet report into the local plan, and it talks about how the further work's been undertaken on the theoretical capacity of the city to accommodate development. In other words, how many homes we can actually build. And they talk about it as 630 homes per year. About where the current plan is now, but significantly below the need identified by consultants in London, and frankly so far below the current government's threshold that we will be below the 65% level that Councillor Stubbs has identified over 20 years. So we have a real case. Now, I've argued before in opposition a reflection of actually Councillor Jones's arguments when put to a meeting of Keep Milton Green. I've always believed that Portsmouth is a special case. I've always believed that the balance that we need means that we should have strategic planning powers so that we can decide how many homes we build. We can decide where they go. We can decide how we can do that. And we will try and fight as far as we can, but I think unless we have those powers, then we will struggle to ensure that we provide not only homes people can afford, but also to carry people with us. Too many people think this city's full. It's not, but they do. And if we're going to deliver the homes that people need and people deserve, then frankly, if we have that approach, that will work. That is the best way forwards. And that's why we believe that it should be down to local decisions, not national decisions, in terms of what we need and how we need it. My other concern with this is that if we don't achieve the targets, we will get punished. I've already spoken with housing officers about a duty to cooperate, about how we can try and encourage work in other authorities to make sure that we can deliver our overall need, but it's not going to be there. And we physically cannot deliver the number of homes that are required. We will be miles below even a 16,000 target that Councillor Jones has identified. And that is frustrating for everyone. And if we can't cooperate, we and other authorities will get punished. Not because of something we did wrong, but because of something we couldn't do. That, to my mind, is not acceptable. That, to my mind, is unfair on the people of this city. And that, to my mind, is something that we should not be faced with. I'm happy to accept the Labour amendment as Councillor Vernon Jackson is, because I think it does raise various issues, particularly in the south of the city, and I think it's one of those issues that we will have to work through and talk through as we go along. But I think overall it's about time that we set out our stall as a council, not run away from lobbying government, not hide from the possibility of criticising central government, because what we need is consensus. What we need is an approach going forwards. That's particularly true in housing. It's particularly true in delivering homes people can afford, whilst recognising that no one wants to live in a concrete jungle. That is the spirit of this amendment. I'm delighted to second it, and I hope we carry it through unanimously. Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanders. I now request all those in favour of the motion. Oh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself there. Apologies, Councillor Vernon Jackson, summing up.
My Lord Mayor, some, of course, may question that you've not been in the chamber very long and so would not know the traditions of the council, although, as I understand, 18 years is normally considered a reasonable time to learn these things. Indeed, absolutely. So, my Lord Mayor, it's been an interesting debate. I think it sounds as if we are all in the same place, that we need and a united voice to say that this city can do the building of homes that we need for local families, and we can do that willingly because they're the local community. But we should not have the government cramming in more development that the city can cope with, more development that local people can cope with. So, my Lord Mayor, thank you for the debate. I hope we can all be unanimous.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Can I see all those now in favour? And the motion subsuming the amendment. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that is carried unanimously. I'm going to have a 15-minute break if we reconvene after the 5 p.m. bells. We've got 2 questions. This is my prerogative. We have 2 questions, and I got a feeling they will be a little bit more divisive. So we're having a break until after the 5 p.m. bells. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you're all feeling a lot more refreshed. I know I certainly am now, so please be seated. Agenda item 11, questions from members under Standing Order 17. Whilst we didn't actually have any scheduled questions, there has arisen 2 urgent questions come in, which has been accepted to be answered by the relevant Cabinet members. So we have a question from Councillor Udy, which Councillor Vernon-Jackson has agreed to answer, and we have a question from Councillor Jones that Councillor Pitt has agreed to answer. So in which case I hand over to the first question. Councillor Udy, I'm afraid this isn't your maiden speech because it's a question, not a speech. So you have to wait for that for next time.
Feel free to clap, though. Again, really? Good afternoon, Lord Mayor and councillors. I have a question for Gerald Vernon-Jackson, our wonderful leader. That'll bite me on the arse in a couple of months' time, surely. Okay, sorry. As reported in the media this weekend, American President Donald Trump is due to visit an unnamed defence site this Friday in the UK. Given that Portsmouth could be one of these sites, could the leader clarify that in the event of the President visiting this area, that he is unwelcome in the city of Portsmouth?
Councillor Vernon-Jackson to answer, please.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I have done some digging to see if there have been any official reports that Donald Trump will come to Portsmouth, and so far I can say that nobody is aware of a visit, so I'd have thought the chances of him coming here are 0 to 0, although it might well be proved wrong. But I expect if he was coming, we would have seen the advance guard in terms of security. If he did come, my view is that we should be courteous to people unless who would come to visit us, unless they pose a positive threat to us. And my view about Donald Trump, I think, is that he seems to have unlearned the 3 key things that people learnt in the Second World War. He seems to have unlearned that protectionism doesn't work and free trade does, and protectionism loses people's jobs and hurts economic development, and his imposition of tariffs on this country is completely unacceptable. The second thing he's unlearned is that collective defence works, and by him attacking NATO, he again has failed to learn the lessons of World War II. And the third is that we have a responsibility for civil rights and people's human rights across the whole world. It's human rights needs defending everywhere, and his relativism in terms of not supporting human rights seems to me again something that was learnt at such cost through World War II, and that for me is the reason that he wouldn't be welcome here. Personally, I think we need to be courteous and welcoming to people, but I think he has gone too far and he's a real threat to this city and to this nation.
Thank you much. Before we go into supplementaries, we just need to have a quick reset for the camera. Whilst we're broadcasting audio, we're not broadcasting vision, so... It's back working again, so you have 2 further supplementaries if you wish to ask them, Councillor Udy.
Sorry. So just to clarify, he is unwelcome in the city. Thanks.
From my point of view, yes, but I'm sure there'll be some people who would welcome with open arms, and that's really worrying.
Do you wish to ask a further supplementary, Councillor Udy?
I would not be welcoming Donald Trump to this city. I have no further questions.
In which case, I have supplementary questions from Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On the 12th of June, the United States and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea made a commitment to establish new relations for peace and prosperity and efforts to build a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. Does Councillor Vernon Jackson still believe his comments in the press that the United States President Donald Trump has destabilised NATO, the United Nations and the World Trade Organization?
Absolutely yes. And I think the evidence is all there from the what's going on with Korea. I think we will all welcome the fact that there are discussions with Korea, and I hope desperately that they are positive and lead to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. But the way in which not only he, but also the North Korean dictator have gone about their rhetoric of screaming abuse at each other through Twitter can't fill any of us with any certainty or any reassurance that either person would resist pressing the nuclear button. That's the thing that terrifies me about Trump.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tompkins, please.
Hello. As you may know, I predicted Trump's win quite a few months before he did win, proud to say. Question for Councillor Vernon Jackson. Would he agree that a patriotic and fairly elected leader like President Trump has received outrageous bias and misrepresentation by the elites and media, and this question is a product of that?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. If my memory is correct, Donald Trump received 3 million fewer votes than the person he then beat. So the popularly elected President of the United States was not allowed to take their seat, for which I think we should all be deeply unhappy. So, my Lord Mayor, I think probably Donald Trump has received a press that he deserves from the balanced press, from which I do not include Fox News. I think luckily, the press have been able to show his narrow-mindedness, his prejudice, his disregard for many, many people, and the threat that he poses to this nation and to others. And I'm really grateful that the press have not been scared by his bully boy tactics.
Thank you. We have Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, I do think, actually, if you're looking for someone who's destabilised world politics lately, you should look no further than Angela Merkel. But my question for you is, Nigel Farage, who was latterly leader of UKIP, is quite close to Donald Trump and has expressed a lot of positive support for him. Do you hold Nigel Farage in similar contempt?
I need to think about this. Small-minded, chauvinistic, xenophobic, refusing to listen to reasoned arguments, ignoring facts that are not convenient for them. I think few could have at least described it as xenophobic. No, I think you're right. I think Farage is not as evil as Trump. But, sorry? Who? Donald Trump? No, I think...
Councillor Harris, if you could wait for your turns. Thank you.
So Madam, I think Nigel Farage has been deeply destructive to this country, as we will see over the next few years. But I probably think he's in quite the same category.
Thank you. And got Councillor Bosher next, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Notwithstanding the personality and the person that's currently the President of the United States, would the leader agree with me that as a city council we need to be mindful of the wider economic benefits that we actually enjoy as a city when the American Navy frequently visit Portsmouth, and to be seen to be anti would actually potentially see the American Navy choose other ports such as Plymouth instead of Portsmouth for future visits to the city, perhaps.
I think it's really important that we are not bullied into silence about people whose behaviour is a threat to us. I think we all have deep respect for the American people and the American nation. It is unfortunate that because of their undemocratic electoral system, the person who came second in the election got to have the main job. And that's unfortunate. But I think we have to be, we can hold an individual in contempt for what he stands for and what he's done, while still having enormous respect for the nation that they come from.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you very much. I wonder if Councillor Vernon-Jackson could confirm if it's still Liberal Democrat policy to adopt proportional representation across the country, and if it is, would he acknowledge the flawed system of proportional representation, as he's just explained that Hillary Clinton won 3,000 or 4,000 votes more than 3 or 4 million votes, more than Donald Trump did in the American presidential elections last November, but yet he has still managed to trump her to the post. And would he also therefore then agree, if he's such a supporter of proportional representation, that therefore probably I should be leader of the council, as the Conservatives polled almost 3,000 votes more than any other party in the city 6 weeks ago?
Thank you, Madam. It's an interesting question. Of course, Mr. Trump is elected through a first-past-the-post system in each state, which is unrepresentative and unproportional. So, yet again, we can see the benefit of having a proportionate system that accurately reflects the votes that are actually cast. So I hope that you would be joining with me in welcoming President Hillary Clinton into this great city.
Councillor Lyon, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Leader of the Council for his ingenious turn of phrase to turn this into something about proportional representation and goodness knows what in terms of elections. Quite clearly, it would be interesting to ask him supplementarily what he thinks about the fact that Rhode Island has 2 senators and California has 2 senators, and the population of both is vastly different. But I really wanted to go on to say that, reminding everybody, of course, not only is this not a state visit, it's an official visit, of course, and the Queen is meeting Donald Trump, and I know that the Queen is held in great regard by the entire Council, and it seems to me strange that our leader feels that he's above even the Queen when it comes to meeting foreign dignitaries. But beyond that, it strikes me that where Donald Trump has succeeded, and this is part of the question.
I would just remind you asking the question.
Part of the question, would you not agree that would he not agree that where Donald Trump has succeeded is in his foreign policy, the idea that had Hillary won the presidency as opposed to the Electoral College, what is likely to have happened is that the Russians and the Chinese would have known what she was going to do, and one of the great strengths of a man I wouldn't have voted for is that nobody knows what he's going to do, so being unpredictable means the Russians and the Chinese have had to go back into their box. But the final question of this is it not good that he's trying to get us to spend more on defence in this country, and perhaps to show him and maybe the MP for Portsmouth South how important it is that the Type 25s actually are, for instance, are dealt with here rather than in Plymouth, might be a very good opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think one of the issues with this visit is the impossible position it puts the Queen in. I think we should all be incredibly sorry for her that she has to grin and bear it to meet that man. And I think it is really unfortunate. And I think we owe her an enormous debt of gratitude that she is prepared to do that and to be pleasant to him. And I am very grateful to her. But I think it is appalling that the government has put her in that position, and we need to have enormous sympathy for her for what the government has done to her. In terms of having somebody who's got their finger on the nuclear trigger, and isn't it good that they're unpredictable? Now, your argument, Ian, along that line is not one that I would support. I think, in seriousness, one of the things I think is really sad about Donald Trump is that he has taken whole sections of where America has led the world, and he's walked away from them. America used to be the flag raiser for free trade. He's now given that to China. He's talking about working closer with Putin than with his European allies. They are terrifying things that this man is doing that put us all at risk. And I think thank heavens he's not coming here. Otherwise, we might have to be pleasant to him as well. But I think he is really, really, really dangerous. I probably agree with Luke that maybe Nigel Farage is not as dangerous, probably because there are fewer people who know who he is. But he is a dangerous man, and allowing a dangerous and unpredictable man to have his finger on the nuclear button is a really bad place for all of us to be, because it makes the world so dangerous.
Thank you. Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm just waiting for the leader to be... Is it not better, Lord Mayor? Somebody once said, George Orr is better than war. And to say, make Donald Trump feel unwelcome is to drive him away and not allow those discussions to take place. You cannot hope to draw him back in if you fail to talk to him. If you think he's doing the wrong thing, you aren't going to make anything better by driving him away. Would you not agree?
Thank you. He's not coming here, so I'm not sure we're driving him away anyway. And I thank Councillor Alcrum for his suggestion that we should give him the freedom of the city. It's not one that I would support.
Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to question 2 from Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you very much. I just need to unlock my computer because I've got to get it ready to email to Stuart. So just give me 30 seconds.
Helping officers, amazing.
Okay, ready. Right. Will the Cabinet member agree to work with me to consider plans to allow the people of Portsmouth to watch the World Cup final, should England reach it, in a public place on a big screen such as the Common? And would the Cabinet member also support me in working with venues such as action stations, community centres and Portsmouth Football Club, who've indicated that they will screen the game in the Victory Lounge?
Thank you to Councillor Jones for her question. As you are aware, I've also been having those conversations with Councillor Painter-Harris going back about a month ago when we first discussed what seemed at the time rather forlorn hope that England might actually get to this stage, but they are, which is great news for our national team. So the answer to the question is yes. And I would hope that we could work completely cross-party on this and make sure that everybody is happy with any proposal that does come forward. It's also important that we do encourage other facilities that have the ability to show football on the big screen to be able to do that, because one of the things that struck me when we had an initial question about this with regard to the quarter-final was actually we have a large number of pubs and clubs in this city, many of whom in recent years have really struggled financially, and that something like this offers them a real opportunity as a payday, which is why when I originally discussed this with Councillor Harris when we had our meeting as Chair and Vice Chair of the Sports Council, we decided at that point that we were both in agreement that it was important that we did as much as we could
in the early stages to stay out of these discussions and allow those pubs and clubs to benefit from that much needed financial income. But we've got to where we are, and more people are going to want to engage in those phases. So any sensible suggestions that come forward as to where we can maximise the opportunities for people to enjoy the football are most welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. I now have Councillor Ashmore. Sorry. Councillor Jones for your supplementaries.
Do you think I'd give up my right for the supplementary? I mean, this is a truly momentous occasion, and you know, whether or not England get to the final, even getting to the semi-final, is an absolute, for me, actually, it's not 28 years ago, was it? It's not quite once in my lifetime, as I'm 29. But in all seriousness, for many people, you know, if they do get to the final, this will be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think, you know, this is such a proud football city. You know, we all say it, we all agree. The football club really is the beating heart of our city. We're a very proud football, community here in Portsmouth, and I am pleased the football club therefore, you know, did say that they would work with you and support on showing it, and I think there's a capacity of around 200 to 300 in the Victory Lounge, which is great. But I think the key to this is really working together, and I think the conversations that yourself, Councillor Peter Harris and I have had over the last weeks, 10 days, actually has been very, very productive, involving the police, listening to what they've had to say from a security perspective, because we did have some very sad fatalities in the city not so long ago in hot weather with young people enjoying themselves in the way that they do. And I think it is important that, I suppose the question really is, does the Cabinet member agree with me that making sure that we are supporting large-scale public events such as the showcasing of the World Cup final, whether England are there or not, but let's say if England are there, to really make sure that we're preventing people from harm and doing it in a safe and measured way?
Yes, absolutely, is the short answer. The slightly longer one, I think it's really important that we understand that Portsmouth is a destination city and that we do things like this really well. We've obviously got Victoria's Festival, which we're all looking forward to, coming up at the end of August, which has become a major event now on the national calendar, not just on the local one. But it's also important that, quite rightly, we do things properly. It's important that this decision and the recommendations around it come from the Portsmouth Event Safety Advisory Group, which is our statutory body that we set up for that consultation, and also that the Council holds itself to the same standard that it would expect from any other event organiser putting something on here in Portsmouth. It would be absolutely wrong, in my opinion, for us to try and circumvent that process, to try and deliver something that didn't fit in with the same requirements others face. So, yes, we need to do that. At a meeting with the Chief Executive was there, and Councillor Vernon Jackson and I were there, and so was Councillor Ashmore. We had a discussion with Superintendent Maggie Blythe. You mentioned the sad events at Mutiny, Councillor Jones, and we did say that we want to continue to work very closely with the police, but we were also minded to point out that we expect Portsmouth to be treated exactly the same way as anywhere else in Hampshire when putting on events. So we would absolutely push back. Did we feel that Portsmouth was not being given a fair crack of the whip in comparison to Southampton or the county? That must not be allowed to happen. We have a very important economy around tourism here. 13,000 jobs in this city are now supported by culture, leisure, tourism and the creative industries, and it's growing all the time. That needs to be a key focus for us as a council and how we support those people moving forward. So making sure that we have a robust conversation with the police, but that we are working very closely with them to facilitate things like this being able to happen is absolutely key to that process. So yes, we have to make sure that that takes place. Obviously the police are part of PSAG. There will be a PSAG meeting around this, and we will look very closely at its outcomes, and those outcomes will be discussed with the other party leaders.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Jones, do you wish to ask your final supplementary? Councillor Jones? No, okay. In which case, moving on to Councillor Ashmore.
Just a quick one. Does the Cabinet member agree with me that it's coming home?
The Cabinet member wishes he had psychic abilities, but currently lacks them, although I completely agree with the sentiment of the question, and yes, I would like to hope so.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Fielding.
Yes. Does the Cabinet member back Labour's earlier call for the government to help fund local authorities to publicly show the World Cup?
I think it's an interesting one, and the answer is yes, of course. How likely that is to actually happen, I don't think any of us are in a position to know at this stage. But this is potentially the largest national event that we'll have had in this country around sport since 1966. I don't think anyone needs reminding of that. And if it means that some people need additional support, then that should be certainly seriously considered by the government. It's also interesting, though, to look back at a discussion we had earlier this afternoon, is that one of the reasons why additional pressures and additional requirements are coming from the police around events generally, not just here, but right across the country, is the lack of resources that they currently face in being able to be strategic around this kind of major occasion. And you're not talking about something that's going to be only happening in Portsmouth. It will be happening right across the country, and those resources are diminished and are spread thinly. So it's important that we make sure that we work very closely with the police to come to the best possible outcome.
Thank you very much. I now have Councillor Udy.
Hello. I'm still not used to this, by the way. This is incredibly weird. So yes, I would just like to ask, given the local connection that Gareth Southgate has to this city, as we all found out in the last couple of days that he attended school here, can the Cabinet member tell me, if we do win the World Cup, could we possibly consider making Gareth Southgate Freeman of the city and invite him down here?
Yeah, it was 3 years, from what I understand, although that was reported in the news, so I'd need to check. But yes, it was reported in the news that it was 3 years. In his early years, I understand, and if you actually read the story, you'll have seen that apparently he left Portsmouth the day before his team were due to play their first ever football game, Lord Mayor. So he would have kicked a ball for the first time in anger in the city of Portsmouth, but his family decided to move the day before, which was rather unfortunate. But I'm sure should the desired outcome occur on Sunday afternoon, that perhaps such a proposal could be considered by the full council.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Peter Harris.
Oh. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can the Cabinet member confirm if Councillor Morgan made contact with him regarding the big screen possibility, and also made contact with the Portsmouth Event Safety Advisory Group before publishing this letter on with the news and on social media?
I can confirm that I am unaware that either of those things happened. I don't think there was any contact with the Portsmouth Event Safety Advisory Group that I'm aware of. The contact was directly to the council leader, and that was via letter on the 4th of July, I believe. So, no, those discussions didn't happen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jonas.
My Lord Mayor, could I ask the Cabinet member, Councillor Steve, in the interest of cross-party harmony, to let me know where he's going to be drinking on the final, because I'd like to join him. Thank you.
For those of you who don't attend culture and leisure briefings and decision meetings, you might get the impression that they are fairly friendly occasions. So thank you for that question, Councillor Jonas. Unfortunately, on this occasion, you won't be able to drink in a pub that I'm operating because I'm no longer in that environment. But I'll be sure to use either write to you via the Royal Mail or to use your landline to let you know where I will be on Sunday.
Councillor Stubbs, please.
Yes. In 1996, after the European Championships took place, a motion was put forward in the House of Commons, supported by Jeremy Corbyn, talking about the press and about the coverage of the football tournament, and described it as, quote, reminiscent of Hitler's use of sport to enhance his evil regime in the 1930s. Would the Cabinet member join me in condemning those outrageous remarks, and also agree with me that it makes it very difficult to take seriously Jeremy Corbyn's newfound interest in football, support for a public holiday in the event of England winning, and demands for money.
Lord Mayor, I wasn't aware that he limited his response to only those things, but yes.
Have no more questions before me, so you've already asked yours, haven't you? Yeah, you've already asked one, Taff. Thank you very much for your good behaviour this afternoon. I've realised the hardest bit about this job is not being able to heckle from the chairmanship. So, as with tradition, I'd like to invite all members, especially those new members who aren't aware of it, into my parlour for light refreshment and some fresh fruit.